TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 1.
Good afternoon, I'm Kate Partridge. Some breaking news in the last hour. The Bank of England has announced its biggest interest rate rise for 27 years. It's jumped from 1.25% to 1.75%, and the bank is warning that the UK economy will be plunged into recession for more than a year. Talk TV reporter Eleanor Sherwood is at the Bank of England with what this means.
It's designed to stop the cost of living from rising quite as quickly as it has been this past year, and its immediate effect will be felt most by the estimated 2 million people who are currently on tracker and variable rate mortgages. They'll see their repayments rise by about £50 a month. In December last year, interest stood at 0.1%. So in the past 8 months, their repayments have risen by about £150, and there's warnings of worse to come.
That's as Ofgem has confirmed the energy price cap will be updated 4 times a year instead of every 6 months. The energy regulators warned that customers face a very challenging winter ahead. They say the price cap will have to rise to stop more energy suppliers going bust and prevent instability in the market. Archie Battersby's life support was not withdrawn this morning after his parents submitted a request to have him moved to a hospice. The decision is now with the High Court after the European Court of Human Rights said yesterday it will not interfere with the decisions of the UK courts. Archie's doctors say it's too risky to move him, but his family insists they should be allowed to choose where the 12-year-old spends his last moments. His mother, Holly Dance, told Times Radio she's heartbroken.
It's going to be awful today. I woke up feeling absolutely sick. My stomach, I just feel like this hospital, I've got so much to answer for.
And Rishi Sunak has launched a fresh attack on Liz Truss's tax policies ahead of tonight's debate. Speaking at a hustings event in Cardiff, the former Chancellor said his rival will only stoke inflation with her plans to cut taxes. But Truss countered, saying we cannot tax our way to growth, and insists her plans will not drive up prices. Meanwhile, Sajid Javid has backed Truss to be the next Prime Minister. Writing in The Times, Javid said Sunak's policies will lead to a high-tax, low-growth economy. Those are the latest news headlines. Still to come, your TalkSport update. But first, the weather.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV weather.
Hello, good afternoon. Less hot today, less humid as well, and that was noticeable through last night as we saw a cold front work its way southwards, introducing more of a northerly, fresher airflow. And that's because we've got high pressure nudging in from the west for the rest of the week. It's high pressure that dominates the scene, allowing for that cooler northerly airflow, although temperatures will be around average for the time of year, but also allowing for largely fine and dry conditions, which is not great news for parts of the south where the rain is desperately needed. Parts of the north, though, for this afternoon will continue to see some wet weather in the form of showers across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, perhaps a few into the North Midlands. But to the south of that, it stays mostly dry with bright or sunny spells. And although temperatures lower than yesterday, around average for the time of year, up to around 25 degrees Celsius in the south and up into the high teens further north. Overnight, some of the showers will fade away, but some will continue across the far northwest of the UK. It stays mostly dry and clear. It will be quite a cool night compared to recently, especially noticeable around rural spots of Scotland, only a few degrees above freezing. Then for tomorrow, we do it all again. Once again, it's going to be another mostly fine and dry day across many areas, but showers will continue to affect northern and western areas of the UK. Warm again as well.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV weather.
Hello again. Manchester United legend Ryan Giggs will go to trial on Monday, accused of attacking and controlling his ex-girlfriend. The start date of the trial was in doubt after Manchester Crown Court was closed this week for asbestos testing. Giggs denies using controlling and coercive behaviour and 2 charges of assault. Chelsea have signed 18-year-old midfielder Carney Chukwuemeka from Aston Villa for £20 million. He's agreed to a 6-year deal. A fan-led national campaign has been launched urging football fans to put an end to gambling sponsorship. Football Supporters Against Gambling Adverts wants clubs across the country to cancel all existing betting partnerships and pledge to reject future advertising deals. It was an emotional night at the Commonwealth Games as Ailish McColgan burst into tears after emulating her mother Liz to win the 10,000-metre gold, while Katarina Johnson-Thompson says retaining her heptathlon title in front of a home crowd will stay with her for a lifetime. And TalkSport will be the only UK broadcaster to offer boxing fans the Alexander Usyk versus Anthony Joshua rematch for free. The two heavyweights are back in the ring on Saturday, August the 20th. Well, that's all for now. We'll be back with more in half an hour.
I'm Tom Newton-Dunn, and this is Talk TV. The conversation starts here. If I had to describe Boris Johnson with 3 words, keeps us busy.
Hello and a very good afternoon, and don't panic folks, it's not Sunday, ignore what it said on the ident, it is Thursday. You haven't fallen asleep and woken up in 2 days' time. It is Tice Talk for the next 3 hours, but I'm standing in for the amazing, the brilliant Ian Collins. He is off today. I'm like Ian's imposter, really. Obviously you couldn't really be as brilliant as Ian, but it's Thursday, it's the 4th of August, and we have massive breaking news, a huge show ahead, because of course that rise in interest rates from 1.25% to 1.75%, accompanied by what I think is the most dramatic statement I think I've ever seen from the Bank of England, with their warnings about the state of the economy, what's ahead of us. So we'll be getting into all of that in the first hour. With lots of experts, with Justin Urquhart-Stewart and Laura Souter to talk about all of that. In the second hour, a different sort of relief, water, or the lack of it, apparently, because yes, thanks to the water companies, we've got a hosepipe ban coming in large parts of the south. We need to talk about that. And the other big geopolitical issue in the second hour that we need to get into is what's really going on around Taiwan. What is China playing at? Are they just using the Ukraine crisis to flex their muscles? We need to talk about that. We need to understand a bit more of that. And then in the third hour, yeah, you know, we're the most surveyed society, I think, in the world, actually. Well, this is really interesting because the Surveillance Commissioner, no less, is questioning the legality of Sadiq Khan's CCTV cameras for the congestion charge in London. But it's not just a London thing. All over the whole of the UK, city after city is planning these clean air zones. Maybe the cameras are illegal. We'll be getting to that. And yes, we'll be getting into the war on woke amongst the civil service. Fascinating attack from the Attorney General, Suella Braverman. We'll be getting into that and much more. Of course, we've got great guests. And my big question, folks, my big, huge question to you is, with all of this grim economic news, what will you do if you can't pay the bills? What will you do if you cannot pay the bills? And we'll be trying to ask some advice about where people can go, other measures that essentially people can adopt, because that is how serious this issue now is. So that's my big question. What will you do if you cannot pay the bills? You know the number, 0344 499 1000, or Talk TV, or send a text 87222 using the word talk. And for the next 3 hours, folks, it's Tice Talk, not on Sunday, but on Thursday, here live on Talk TV from the Talk Radio studios. And I thought what I would do, because obviously I can't do a Sunday sermon, so I thought I would do, to open the show, a Thursday thought. And as I was coming to the studios, I thought to myself, why does everything take so long? And if you think around you in life, some things do just take unbelievably long. Now, I've got to be honest, one of my flaws is I'm an impatient guy. You know, I just generally want to get on with things, get stuck in, So I'm pretty impatient, and it frustrates me when things take too long. And when I thought about the list of things, it goes on and on and on. I mean, the leadership contest. Can you believe there's another 4 weeks of this? There's at least 4 weeks. There's another month of this until September the 5th. We're hearing hustings after hustings, basically saying the same old thing. You know, we know which side of the fence both of the candidates are. Why does it need to take another month? Can't we get on with it? Why is it taking so long? And also, the cost of living crisis. We know it. It's right in front of us. And yet, nothing's happening at the government. And the list goes on. Public services. And let's just name a few, shall we? I mean, tragically, waiting lists for ambulances. Far, far too long. I think I read the average time now for an ambulance is about 51 minutes, when the target is just over 10 minutes. Let's look at hospital waiting lists. Way, way, way too long. And don't get us started on GP appointments. I mean, you've got to wait way too long on the phone at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then good luck whether or not you're going to get an appointment that week or the following week. Now, my view is, you know, we wouldn't mind paying higher taxes. Well, perhaps we would, but if we're paying high levels of taxes, I think we've got the right to demand a high level of service, great service. Now, I touched earlier on the Bank of England raising those interest rates. The truth is, actually, the Bank of England took too long to raise interest rates, and it's essentially playing a sort of panicky catch-up. That is the reality. Here's another thing that takes too long. Yes, on the issue of the illegal migrants coming across the channel. Why is it taking the European Court of Human Rights lawyers and the judges, why is it taking them so long to make another ruling? I mean, it was weeks ago that they stopped that flight going. Why have we got to wait week after week after week? And yet every day, boat after boat after boat is making that journey across from France, a safe country that we enjoy going on holiday to the UK. So all of these things taking too long. And I'll just take a break and just refer you back to the question of the day, folks, because it's this serious. What will you do if you cannot pay? I can't actually believe I'm asking that question. Now, back to the list of things that take too long. Well, you know, my background in business is in the property world, and getting planning consents, whether it's for a garage extension, to put an extension on the back of the house, planning just takes way too long. Once again, it's part of the local council's public services. It takes too long. Now, for the fantastic tradesmen amongst you, this could be a little bit controversial, but are builders' tea breaks too long? Or indeed, are they? The only thing, is it too short? Is it too quick? Let me know. Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. The other thing that definitely takes too long are train announcements. I mean, honestly, they go on and on and on. Please, can they go on some form of training course to shorten the train announcements? Here's another thing that's taking too long, isn't it? The strikes. I mean, we've got to sort them out, but it does seem to be taking too long. And we'll be talking about this later on. I mean, water pipes. You know, the fact is, fixing them is taking too long. That's the reason for the hosepipe ban. And here's another thing. How many of you, is it a real bugbear that roadworks take too long? How often do you see cone after cone after cone and nothing happening? No one there. Taking way too long. I've not seen it because it's too long, but the film The Irishman is probably way too long. Let us know if you think any other films are too long. What I do know, and it's one of the reasons I don't watch them, is all these reality TV shows. They're way too long. Can't they get them over with a bit faster? That, I think, is surely the case. Another thing that takes too long, it's possibly the reason I don't go there, is getting to Cornwall. I mean, honestly. What else takes too long in your view? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. What I do know is that many of us would say that Test cricket which takes 5 days. I mean, you might totally justifiably, unless you're Jacob Rees-Mogg, you might really justifiably say, why does a cricket game take 5 days? It's a really good question. We should probably get Jacob on to ask the question, what else in your mind takes too long? There's no doubt in my mind, because the Bank of England has taken too long over raising interest rates to try to deal with inflation, that is causing the current level of panic and the real concerns that that have been expressed by the Bank of England. I mean, just listen to this. The Bank of England have warned, essentially, that households face the longest, the deepest fall in living standards as energy bills triple, and that the UK has plunged into a deep and protracted recession. So I'm afraid, folks, I'm going to finish my Thursday thought by the most serious thing that's going to take too long. And I fear that this recession, this cost of living crisis, is going to take too long. Here endeth my Thursday thought. Now, there we are. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. What else in your mind takes too long? And what will you do if you cannot pay the bills? I may not be able to answer all the questions, but certainly with some of the experts we've got coming up this hour, we've got Justin Urquhart-Stewart and we've got Laura Suter. They might have some answers as to where we can go if we need help to try and resolve some of these challenges, because they are huge. I mean, I really just cannot emphasise the gravity of what the Bank of England is saying now that actually the cost of living crisis will go through until 2024. I mean, that's like the next general election. Maybe bring it on, maybe the wait for that is too long as well. And that the UK economy will contract not just for a quarter or two. No, it's going to say the Bank of England is forecasting, and they're not always right. They're not always right. They're forecasting 5 consecutive quarters. The optimist in the room, folks, is the city editor of the Daily Mail, Alex Brummer. He thinks that actually there's too much anxiety, there's too much concern, and that things are not as bad as they are being made out. He's written a page-long piece on that, setting out his reasoning. I hope he's right, but I have to say, I fear I'm wrong. Stay with us. Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to Justin Urquhart-Stewart, who is, of course, the co-founder of the Regionally Investment Platform. You're listening on Thursday to Tice Talk on Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk on this Thursday afternoon. Well, I walked into that, didn't I? I mean, I absolutely walked into that one. I was talking about what takes too long in my Thursday thought. So inevitably, Rusty came straight back at me. No nonsense, bang. Richard, your introduction takes too long. There we are, I walked into that. But my question to everybody about actually what will you do if you can't pay the bills? Already I've had a couple of big tweets on that. There's one here from Rax who says, I spent years, Richard, getting out of debt, yet I can see whatever I saved ebbing away. What shall I do is, if I can't pay the bills, I'll offer each company a penny a week. And I believe that a court would back me as I show I'm offering to pay what I can. Failing that, Max says, Richard, you want a lodger? Well, Max, look, it is tough, and I'm afraid there are many, many people who are going to be facing these challenges. And I think the honest thing to do is to show that that essentially you're trying. And I think it's a fair suggestion. If you're gradually making inroads into a debt, then that is the right thing. We've got another one here from, I think it's Chili Chips, says, I've already lost my car, I can eat once a day, and yet now I've got to be told I'm going to have to pay 410 quid a month on energy. And I haven't even paid the rent this month. So come October, I'll be choosing, do I heat or do I pay some rent or pay some energy? These are the challenges that people face, and that news today will be devastating, of the increase in interest rates from 1.25% to 1.75%. And I'm delighted on the phone, on Zoom, we have Justin Urquhart-Stewart, co-founder of the Regional Investment Platform. Good afternoon, Justin. I'm not actually sure it is good. I think it's just the afternoon with the news we've had from the Bank of England.
I think, Richard, you're absolutely right. There's nothing good about it at all. And the problem is, the general view is that when you've got inflation coming up, oh, we'll put up interest rates and that'll try and control it. But remember, most of the time when you've got inflation running, it's because the economy is running too hot. So you want to cool it down, so you raise rates. We're not in that position at the moment. We want the economy to be growing. There's every chance that we might fall into a technical recession by the end of this year. So just putting up interest rates is not the automatic salve to resolve our problems. No, it needs much more deeper thinking than we're getting currently from the two Conservative candidates for Prime Minister. Not just a matter of just as it handing out a bit more cash. Now is the time to actually really be seriously thinking about what's the tax structure we need to have. Also, focus on those areas where we're growing the economy very effectively, in technology and those sort of things. Merely putting up interest rates is a negative issue, and I'm afraid you don't want to slow the economy, you want to get it going faster.
And so what we've got actually is a situation, we've got this complete vacuum of leadership of government. There's basically a vacuum of government, and yet now, possibly belatedly, we've got the Bank of England raising rates. But Justin, what really concerns me is the comments alongside that stark 0.5% increase. I don't recall ever seeing such a stark warning from the Bank of England.
I think they've been really frightened over the past few months because they've been castigated, as we've done so on the channel, to say, look, they should be putting interest rates up faster. But anything else, you need, actually, if you're going to slow down, if the economy does go into recession, that's the time you want to cut rates. But it's quite difficult to cut rates when they're at naught or pretty close to it. No, remember, the rates we've got at the moment are really a hangover from the banking crisis. This now needs to be addressed in the same way we were addressing the pandemic. Is it an opportunity for furlough schemes to try and make sure those businesses are going to be there, the support is there, and more to the point, people have a chance of actually being able to, if not pay the bills now, find some way of managing it further along the line.
And Justin, I'll put you on the spot. Do you know what percentage of mortgages might be on fixed rates, to try and look for some good news on a difficult day, and therefore that those mortgage holders are protected for a while? Do you know roughly what percentage that is?
Yeah, I understand it was around about 60%, the last figures I had. But so you can only be very precise, I think, because different companies have ways of measuring it. But yeah, so quite a lot. And of course, all they're doing there is delaying the inevitable, because when it comes back, it's going to be a nasty hike. Of course, those who are paying just on a variable rate, well, they'll feel that coming through immediately. Now, it won't seem too much at the moment, depending on the size of your mortgage, but you actually then see what's coming down the line from us in terms of inflation. It's going to be very painful indeed. Time now for some initiative from our prospective leaders to say it's not a tax cut. This is we're focused on growing the economy, high-tech businesses in hubs, and being able to address it there, not just HS2 and bringing back sort of the last decades.
So, Justin, here's a thing, though, that, and I sort of hesitate to bring even more challenging news, but the Resolution Foundation is saying inflation could go up to 15%, and we all pray that in a sense they're wrong on that. But to what level do you see the Bank of England having to raise rates?
It really is a terrible decision, a judgment of Solomon. I'm raising rates because I want to make sure rates are high enough so that if we fall into recession, I can cut them again. But I know by putting interest rates up, actually, I now means the cost of borrowing goes up, and so there'll be more concern that way. So either side is painful, but you can't just sit there and watch it happening. The Resolution Foundation's reports are normally pretty good, but pretty pessimistic. The thing to remember, of course, is each of our inflation rates vary according to who you are. If you're an old fart who's just retired instead of wearing red braces, actually now issue towards drugs has actually been a vital need. And if you've got to pay for those, if it's not on the NHS, life gets expensive. Whereas if you're a teenager in 20s, actually your inflation's gone down because a lot of those electrical goods and those sort of elements have actually got cheaper.
Yes.
But it's going to pay the utility bills as well.
And I think the reality is that we're now facing the worst inflation rate in the whole of the G7 because of energy prices going up. Yeah. So, if the Resolution Foundation are nearly right and inflation keeps going up, then the Bank of England will keep raising rates, and then essentially we tip into something really quite serious. What troubles me, though, Justin, we keep hearing Rishi Sunak saying that we've got to get on top of inflation. We never hear from him what he's actually going to do to do it. He just says he's going to do it. But how's he going to do it?
It's a silly thing that we've had over these hustings going through. They all talk about the mantra of cutting taxes. But cutting taxes doesn't necessarily grow anything. Now we need some imagination to sit there and say, right, OK, we're in as difficult situation as we were with the pandemic. We know there are areas of the economy which are going to grow and need more investment. High-tech areas are something we're really rather good at. Not focused on London, but around the country, because you've got Silicon Glen, Silicon Fen, Silicon Gorge, which apparently that's Bristol. But these are actually growing businesses at a time when everyone else is sort of sucking through their teeth saying, we're all doomed. We're not doomed. It's going to be a very difficult time, not just for us, but for the rest of the world. China's slowing up quite dramatically, and if you believe all their figures, Europe is going to be weaker, and I'm afraid we're at the wrong end of this stick as well. So applying yesterday's measures to the issue we've got today is highly unimaginative. What I want to be able to see now is the opportunity of giving companies the benefit of being able to invest further. How to do that? Well, you give people, particularly the wealthier people, an incentive to whether it's actually doing more investment. Yes, and then you can always a quick quid pro quo say, for X amount you're going to put in, we'll make an arrangement over inheritance tax for you, or whatever it happens to be. It doesn't cost the government anything, but it's actually you're making sure that the money is going into businesses. Let's be clear, there is no shortage of investment money in this country. The problem is someone took away the piping on how to get the money in.
What there is, though, Justin, is a shortage of money in millions of people's bank accounts. Thank you so much indeed for that. That was Justin Urquhart-Stewart from the Regional Investment Platform with his concerns about where we're going, his suggestions how we create growth. This is really serious, folks, and we have got to create some growth. We've got to get going. These leadership contenders, the moment that one of them is appointed, they have got to grow for growth big time. Stay with us. We're taking your calls after the break. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Tice Talk at the home of common sense. It is, of course, Talk TV.
Just when you think you've read it all, gender activists want scientists to stop categorising ancient human remains as either male or female. Clearly, anatomically, you can tell if it's a male skeleton or a female skeleton. These woke archaeologists are labelling them as non-binary or gender-neutral. What message does it send to kids who are studying history? It's absolute nonsense, isn't it? Join me, David Bull, for incisive political comment, analysis and, of course, some fun here on Talk TV.
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. The Bank of England has predicted that the UK is heading towards a long recession starting this winter. They say there will be 5 consecutive quarters of economic downturn, which would make it the longest since the 2008 financial crisis. Inflation is now predicted to peak at 13% early next year. In response, the bank has raised interest rates by 0.5% to 1.75%. The Governor of the Bank of England says it would hit the poor the hardest.
This is a very uncomfortable situation to be in. We're very aware of the impact it has therefore on those who are least well off. If we don't bring inflation back to target, bearing in mind the huge scale of the energy shock we're seeing, if we don't bring it back to target, and if we get these so-called second-round effects entering in, it's going to get worse. And it will get worse precisely, I'm afraid, for those who are least well off in society.
Well, that's as Ofgem has confirmed the energy price cap will be updated 4 times a year instead of every 6 months. The energy regulator has warned that customers face a very challenging winter ahead. They said the price cap will have to rise to stop more energy suppliers going bust and prevent instability in the market. Rishi Sunak has said that Liz Truss's tax policies will only stoke inflation. It's ahead of another debate tonight. Truss has disagreed and said to Sunak that we cannot tax our way to growth and said her tax cuts wouldn't be inflationary. And Archie Battersby's life support was not withdrawn this morning after his parents submitted a request to have him moved to a hospice. Archie's doctors say it's too risky to move him, but his family insists that they should be allowed to choose where the 12-year-old spends his last moments. Well, that's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk this Thursday afternoon. Another one here. Oh dear, I'm in terrible trouble. Yeah, he said that my intro was too long, but otherwise brilliant. So I'm a bit confused. Was it too long or was it brilliant or was it a bit of each? Who knows? Anyway, we've got some great tweets coming in here. One from Steve who says, what will I do if I can't pay my bills? Well, I intend to give up my flat and go back into a tent, hopefully get a job so I don't have to face these bills by these profiteering companies and their parasitic shareholders. That's from Steve in Cambridge. He is not happy. Well, we'll head from Cambridge there with that tweet down to Orpington, where Graham's on the line. Good afternoon, Graham. How's it going?
Well, very tough, Richard, and I think your intro wasn't too long. I think it was to the point, really. I sit here shaking my head for the last 2 months to see how the Bank of England and our elected representatives, who're supposed to have some intelligence on it, have mucked this up completely. We are clearly facing cost-push inflation. Now, what is happening is, because we haven't done anything about that, we've actually now we'll get demand pull inflation because, you know, the salaries of these people, unions are going out on strike, and that's what will happen to this country, and people will be putting in inflationary pay demands because of the actions of our elected leader and this guy at the Bank of England. It's not good enough to say to people in this country, oh, it's a shame, you're all going to be in terrible trouble. What we should be doing is we should get in, we should actually reduce the petrol prices by taking off the taxation for a period of time to get poor people through that. That will then reduce the costs of food, and you've got to deal with it, not just the blunt instrument of interest rates, but you've got to deal with it in other ways to get us through this terrible period.
Graham,
I feel very, very sorry for people who are bleeding out their eyes now, trying to pay, and people turning around and saying, well, we've got a hard time in the future, but you put up with it. We elect these people to help us. We elect these people to
Graham,
do so.
You've hit the nail on the head, and actually there's a very good piece by Howard Cox in the editorial of The Sun today referring exactly to cutting taxes on fuel duty. In my emergency budget about 5 or 6 weeks ago now, I said you had to cut taxes on consumer goods, which the government can afford to do if it cuts out unnecessary waste. And if you cut taxes like that, then guess what? Mathematically, inflation goes down, and that's what they've done in Germany. They've cut tax by about 20p a litre, and their inflation on the back of that sort of thing is starting to turn the corner.
Yeah, it certainly is, and I don't know why we're not seeing that, why people... I mean, Sunak, I mean, you leave it to the future. You can't leave this to the future. This is a crisis in this country. I don't want to see people being thrown out of houses. Don't forget Osborne, a few years back, was encouraging people to take 95% mortgages to get into the housing situation. But, you know, these people are not doing enough. It's about time they grew up and actually gave a decent, assessment of what is going on. And I do think that the governor of the Bank of England is out of his depth because he just keeps on raising interest rates, which is causing appalling problems to people in this country.
It really is. Well, Graham, thank you very much. That was a very good analysis. And inflation does consist of two things. You've got demand inflation, where people have actually got essentially too much money and therefore they'll pay a higher price to get something quickly. That's demand inflation. You control that by interest rates. But cost push inflation, where the inputs, the supply of goods, and in this case the supply of goods from overseas, if the price of that goes up, that's what they call cost push inflation. But let's go from Orpington to elsewhere in London, where Nigel is on the line. Hi, Nigel.
Oh, good afternoon. Hope all is well. I rang you about interest rates and about the water. I just want to go with interest rates first of all. I think people seem to forget two things about interest rates. First of all, they've been artificially low for far too long, and people have been able to borrow money, excessive amount of money, and got out of their depth. And I remember, I think it's 1990-91, where interest rates were 15%. Now, that's a long time ago, but they were 15%. And I remember I had my first mortgage. I've had a lot since then. It was a huge jump when I first started. It went up and up and up. So that's the first point. The second part about interest rates also is that mortgage companies now today are extending the loan time to life mortgages for those people who are facing difficulty. But I think the other sad thing is that people who are on interest-only mortgages are the ones who are really going to suffer, because they seem to forget that after the period of their loan, they still owe the capital sum.
Yes, and you're quite right about... I mean, I'm old enough also to remember the high interest rates. I mean, they were interest at 15% pretty briefly, but you know, it was quite normal to have interest rates of 8, 10, 11%. I mean, of course, inflation generally was higher then, and it came tumbling down. I think you're right. They have been artificially low, and for a variety of reasons, they haven't stimulated enough growth. And then all of a sudden, when you start printing, hundreds of billions of pounds, we shouldn't be surprised if we get inflation.
Yeah, exactly. And just one more mention about water. People have when you have credit cards, you have credit. People spend a lot of money which they don't have, and this is a problem. They're spending them. They're just having too much money to actually spend. But just quickly, in relation to the water, we don't have a water shortage in this country. I don't know where this is coming from. We're an island surrounded by billions and billions of gallons of water, which they can build desalination plants. And living in London, as you work in London, I presume you live in London also, when was the last time the River Thames went dry?
Well, that's right. But of course, it turns out, Nigel, that they built a desalination plant, but they didn't think about actually turning it on and checking that it works. It seems that it sort of opened, from what I read, in 2010. The late Duke of Edinburgh, he opened it, but it's not quite clear whether actually it's ever been put into proper use. It does seem extraordinary to me. Nigel, thank you so much for that. That is Nigel, also in London, with his thoughts about interest rates. I mean, there's no question they've remained very low for a long time. And there is an issue, a huge issue. Low interest rates has meant that actually people have been able to afford more on their housing. The price of housing is inflated, and so it's going on. And it's like a relentless treadmill. I don't know how high interest rates are going to have to go, but that warning from the Bank of England means I think we do have to be prepared for the fact that it's not going to stop at 1 3/4%. It's possible the Bank of England have quite deliberately made a sort of a really scary warning to try and sort of shock people. Well, I have to say it certainly shocked me, because I've never seen a warning like that before. Lots of messages coming in. talking about too long, one here from Christopher who says, when I phone HMRC, I have to wait 10 minutes listening to a message about visiting their website before I get through to an operator. You're so right. I think definitely that takes way too long for sure. And then Rob on the road has just messaged in, this is brilliant. In the bulletin it says the energy price cap is to prevent energy companies going bust. So now we're bailing out energy companies in the same way that we bailed the banks out in 2008. And Rob says, do me a favour. I have to say, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And it is a real issue. Of course, there are two different types of energy companies. You've got the energy producers that are actually, in a sense, extracting the oil and gas out of the ground, out of the oceans. And then you've got the suppliers that are actually essentially sort of selling it to us and billing us, and it's many of those who have already gone bust. There's not that many of them left, and I tell you what, if lots of people stop paying the bills, then they're going to have problems too. Anyway, coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to the head of personal finance at AJ Bell, Laura Souter. Maybe she'll have some brainwaves as to what we do to save money so we can pay those bills. Stay with us, it's Tice Talk, it's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk here on Thursday afternoon. I know if you're hoping to hear Ian's wonderful tones, he is off today. I'm standing in, so you'll have to put up with me until 4 o'clock, when at 4 o'clock, the good doctor, the Dr. David Bull, is doing Drive. And then at 7 o'clock, of course, we've got the news desk with Tom Newton-Dunn. And then at 8 o'clock, yes, incredibly, Jeremy Kyle, he is standing in for Piers Morgan on Uncensored. He's loving his big new studio. You can't get him out of there. Absolutely loving it. So loads to look forward to throughout the afternoon. Some great messages coming in here. Very sweet one here. When I asked in my intro, what's taking too long? A message comes back at me. It's taking too long for the public to elect a Reform MP. Here. I agree with that. And another one from Jenny who says, Andrew Bailey, this is quite good actually, Andrew Bailey ought to be at the Old Bailey. Boom. For bankrupting the UK through negligence. It's his job to watch inflation, and he took the eye off the ball, and now he's panicking. Well, let's talk to Laura Souter, the head of personal finance at the stockbrokers and investment house AJ Bell, to get the latest views on this interest rate rise and where it might go and what people can do about it for those who are really struggling to pay the bills. Laura, thank you for joining me on Tice Talk. Great to have you with us. So, I guess in a sense, this interest rate rise was expected. What really shocked me, Laura, was the gravity of the comments around it from the Bank of England.
Yeah, I think on its own, this big interest rate rise, the biggest increase we've seen for 27 years, that would have been dramatic enough. But actually, it's kind of been overshadowed by the economic forecasts that the banks come out with that have so much more doom and gloom than they predicted last time around, that actually people are slightly shrugging off that interest rate rise and instead focusing on the fact that inflation is going to go higher than they thought, for longer than they thought. The UK is going to slip into recession. I mean, it's a pretty bleak outlook.
It really is, isn't it? And, I mean, you're obviously very close to the markets, what's going on in the city. Is there a sort of, what are the markets saying in terms of where they think base rate may go to, where it sort of peaks? Is there any good news out there?
As always with these kind of crystal ball forecasts, it varies a lot. Some economists think that it will stay at the level that it is, so 1.75%. They think that that's going to be the peak. The bank itself has a kind of model that it bases it on, assumptions that it bases its outlook on, and that looks at the interest rate rising to 3%. So that's some significant increases from where we are today. Obviously, that's not them guaranteeing that that's what's going to happen, but that's just their forecast.
Wow, so that really, I mean, if it goes up another, 3%, because even this rate, I think I read that for the average home loan per month, this 0.5% is a whisker under £200 extra in mortgage payments. Does that sound about right?
So it really depends on the level of borrowing you have. Actually, the average mortgage in the UK is around about £130,000. So if we looked at that, the impact of today's rate rise is about £400 a year extra, just today's rate rise. But what we've got to frame that in is this is the 6th interest rate rise we've seen since December last year. We've seen a dramatic increase in rates in a pretty short period of time. And so you kind of can't take today's increase in isolation. Homeowners who are on those variable rate deals will have seen a massive increase in their borrowing costs just so far this year.
And my previous guest was saying that about 60% of mortgages are fixed, obviously for sort of varying durations, and so the rest are variable. Does that sound about right?
So I think it's actually slightly higher now. The past few years, because we've had rock bottom mortgage rates, people have been really keen to fix their mortgage rates. Okay. So that's tipped it further in the balance of more people fixing. So at the moment in the UK, there's 1.9 million homeowners who are on a variable rate deal. So that's either a tracker deal where their rate goes up directly with the Bank of England base rate, or they're on the standard variable rate, so the mortgage lender's most expensive rate that you tip onto when you come off any fixed rate.
Right. And my question that I asked at the beginning of my show, Laura, I mean, it's a question you sort of hope you'd never have to ask, but, what would people do if they cannot pay the bills? And I'm just interested whether you've got any thoughts on that, which agencies, which advisors people could talk to, because this is what people are facing, and we've got to try and help.
Yeah, and it's a really real prospect for a lot of people. If not now, then potentially further down the line when we get into winter and costs increase again if rates go up and energy bills are higher. So, yeah, I think the first port of call is to speak to your lender. So if we're talking about not being able to make mortgage payments, it's actually talking to your mortgage provider, which might seem like quite a scary thing to do. But it's better to speak to them when you realise that you are struggling before you miss any payments, rather than slightly burying your head in the sand and getting a few months down the line of missing payments. And there are things they can do to try and either give you a mortgage holiday, temporarily reduce the amount that you're paying, or change your mortgage altogether, so extend the term of it, which effectively reduces the amount that you pay each month.
And Laura, I think that's a brilliant piece of advice. Certainly in my business experience, the one thing that banks and lenders hate is a surprise. They hate a shock. So actually, you know, being upfront with people and say, look, I think I'm going to have a problem, you know, at the next month's payment or the one after that, giving people that, lenders that notice, they'd much rather that, wouldn't they, and have an honest and open chat.
Yeah, and I think you can get help that way. I can entirely understand the logic of why people might not want to go to their mortgage lender if they think they're going to have problems. I think some people might be fearful that the mortgage lender would say, right, well, that's it, we're taking your home from you. But that's not the case. They have an obligation from the regulator to help you if you are struggling. So it is definitely better to go to them before you miss those payments rather than further down the line, when that will also have had an impact on your credit report if you miss those payments. And it's really the same if it comes to any form of debt. So if we're talking not necessarily about mortgages, but about credit cards or personal loans, it's really about kind of trying to switch to a different deal that's cheaper if you can, or if you can't, talk into your provider.
And I guess that might extend to things like car loans and that sort of thing. And are there any other agencies, advisors that people should turn to help that you can think of?
Yeah, so I think Citizens Advice is a really good first port of call, because they can have a pretty holistic view over your finances, and they'll be able to help you with things like if there's benefits that you're not claiming, or if there's government support that you're entitled to but that you're not accessing at the moment, as well as also being able to direct you towards more specific debt help or mortgage help or whatever your need is. I think that is a great first port of call, and then they can kind of signpost you to other more specific help, such as debt charities.
That's really, really helpful, Laura. Thank you so much for that. That was Laura Suter at AJ Bell, Head of Personal Finance, and a couple of really great suggestions. First of all, if you're struggling to pay bills, Citizens Advice Bureau, very experienced. But that other suggestion, you know, whoever you might be borrowing money from, speak to them early. Give them a heads up, rather than trying to bury your head in the sand and hope that it all goes away. There's nothing worse that a lender is to have a shock. I'd much rather know early and try and help. I think that really is great advice from Laura Suter. Thank you so much for that. We're going to take a call here from Mansfield, I think, where Stephen is on the line. Hi, Stephen. How are you doing?
Hi, Richard. Great programme. Love it.
Thank you. Thank you. What's on your mind? Have you got some advice how to pay the bills, or are you a bit grumpy with Mr. Bailey, or what?
This is one thing that I was thinking about. I think, you know, I've got about 100 grand in a pension that I've saved up all my life.
Lucky you. Well done.
Yeah, but the thing is, I think we should be allowed to access that and not pay tax on it, because I've paid tax on it over my working life so far.
That's interesting. So are you thinking that you'd want to try and access it a bit early?
Yeah, I'm over 55, so you can access it.
That's right, because that is the limit. You can use it after 55, can't you?
Yeah, that's what it said, yeah. I've actually talked to a bank about it, but all they said was, you know, you need to think about it, blah, blah, blah. It might cost you a lot more money in tax, but why can't the government waive the tax?
Well, this is the big question, isn't it, Stephen, as to, you know, where is... I mean, I'm a great believer in reducing tax on consumer goods, on personal income, lift the threshold so that you increase the incentive to, essentially the incentive to work. Yeah. And I think that this is the key thing, because people need to be able to pay these bills.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm 64 years old. My wife had to kind of retire because she worked for the NHS all her life, and you know, in the end, she had to leave because of the stress that there was under, you know, just before COVID happened, and she had a nervous breakdown. So I've had to I packed my job in, I had to look after her, getting 67 quid a week. My wife gets that PIP payments, but it's you know, it's come at the wrong time for us. We was getting ready to retire altogether. So, but obviously now we can't afford it. I mean, I can't even afford to drive my car. to take my wife to these NHS meetings and stuff that she needs to go to.
Stephen, you are. That is such a common theme, common story. Well, thank you for sharing it with us, and thank you to your wife for what she's done for the NHS. I'm sorry that she had to retire early there, but all best wishes to you. That was Stephen in Mansfield. We've just got time to head from Mansfield to the West Midlands, sunny Walsall, where Andrew is there. Hi, Andrew.
Hello.
What's on your mind? We've just got a minute, sir.
Okay, you say about what will you do if you struggle to pay your bills?
Yes.
It's more a case of what the companies do when you don't pay. One example that I have regularly, I don't pay my TalkTalk bill on time all the time. I'm a few days late. And they punish me with a £12.50 late payment fee.
Wow.
I only pay them £31 a month.
Ooh, that's expensive.
And, this is how it is with a lot of these companies. For people who struggle, who don't pay, they get punished with late payment fees.
Yeah.
And then, I can go all the way down the track, even with council tax. You end up in court. They lump all the charges on you.
And you get the extra bills. Andrew, that sounds huge. Well, you heard that advice just there before I go. Speak to them early to give them a heads up, and hopefully they'll keep those fees down. Andrew, thank you so much for that thought. Really good point there. Some of the late payment fees from companies. We've got lots to come in the second and third hour. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It is Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 2.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. The Bank of England has predicted that the UK is heading towards a long recession starting this winter. They say there'll be 5 consecutive quarters of economic downturn, which would make it the longest since the 2008 financial crisis. Inflation is now predicted to peak at 13% early next year. Well, in response, the Bank of England has raised interest rates by 0.5% to 1.75%. The governor of the Bank of England largely blamed Russia's actions in Ukraine for the crisis. He warned it would hit the poorest the hardest.
This is a very uncomfortable situation to be in. We're very aware of the impact it has, therefore, on those who are least well off. If we don't bring inflation back to target, bearing in mind the huge scale of the energy shock we're seeing, if we don't bring it back to target, and if we get these so-called second-round effects entering in, it's going to get worse. And it will get worse precisely, I'm afraid, for those who are least well off in society.
Well, that's as Ofgem has confirmed the energy price cap will be updated 4 times a year instead of every 6 months. The energy regulator has warned that customers face a very challenging winter ahead. They say the price cap will have to rise to stop more energy suppliers from going bust and prevent instability in the market. Economist Jack Leslie says although it will be tough, the government must help bring down the costs.
I think it's really difficult. I mean, we need to recognise that, the government doesn't have an easy job here, and they don't have an easy tool to cut energy prices. So what the measures they need to take are the ones that are kind of most efficient on protecting people from the worst effects of the crisis.
Rishi Sunak has said that Liz Truss's tax policies will only stoke inflation. It's ahead of another debate tonight. Truss has disagreed and said to Sunak that we cannot tax our way to growth, and said that her tax cuts wouldn't be inflationary. And Archie Battersby's life support was not withdrawn this morning after his parents submitted a request to have him moved to a hospice. Archie's doctors say it's too risky to move him, but his family insists that they should be allowed to choose where the 12-year-old spends his last moments. His mother, Holly Dance, has told Times Radio that she's heartbroken.
It's going to be awful today. I woke up feeling absolutely sick. My stomach, I just feel like this hospital, I've got so much to answer for.
Well, that's the latest. Now time for today's weather.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV Weather.
Hello, good afternoon. Less hot today, less humid as well, and that was noticeable through last night. So we saw a cold front work its way southwards, introducing more of a northerly, fresher airflow. And that's because we've got high pressure nudging in from the west for the rest of the week. It's high pressure that dominates the scene, allowing for that cooler northerly airflow, although temperatures will be around average for the time of year, but also allowing for largely fine and dry conditions, which is not great news for parts of the south where the rain is desperately needed. Parts of the north, though, for this afternoon will continue to see some wet weather in the form of showers across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, perhaps a few into the North Midlands. But to the south of that, it stays mostly dry with bright or sunny spells. And although temperatures lower than yesterday, around average for the time of year, up to around 25 degrees Celsius in the south and up into the high teens further north. Overnight, some of the showers will fade away, but some will continue across the far northwest of the UK. It stays mostly dry and clear. It will be quite a cool night compared to recently, especially noticeable around rural spots of Scotland, only a few degrees above freezing. Then for tomorrow, we do it all again. Once again, it's going to be another mostly fine and dry day across many areas, but showers will continue to affect northern and western areas of the UK. Warm again as well.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV Weather.
I'm Tom Newton-Dunn, and this is Talk TV. The conversation starts here. If I had to describe Boris Johnson with 3 words, keeps us busy.
Welcome back to Tice Talk, folks. It is Thursday, yes, don't be surprised. I know you wanted to hear the glorious tones of Ian Collins, but he has got a day off today. I must say, I thought Paddy was a little bit harsh when he said, "Hi, Richard, good show. Where's the Collins today? Has he got a hangover?" I mean, steady on. It's only Thursday. That gets later in the night, later in the week. Anyway, now I'm here until 4 o'clock, and it is Thursday. I gave my Thursday thought earlier about why things take so long. We've had some fantastic comments, and a very grateful message here from Andrew from Macclesfield, who says, "Thanks to listening to Talk Radio early in the year, we fixed our mortgage at a good rate for the next 7 years." So there we are. Some of the advice we give is good. I suspect it's not all perfect, but we try our best. And it is not an easy time. I was talking in the first hour about, if you can't pay your bills, it's better to speak to companies, speak to lenders early. And generally, in my experience, banks hate and lenders, they hate a shock, they hate a surprise. They'd much rather know early. But actually, Jill has a slightly different view, which is that, and Jill says, my experience is that mortgage lenders are vicious. Given that lenders never loan any money, it's just created. They're not out of money if interest is being paid. Steve Baker spoke on this in the House of Commons. He did. Steve is very technical on monetary matters. But, as I say, there may be some lenders that are not that helpful, but in my experience, they'd rather know early. And with domestic mortgages and things, they have got certain regulatory obligations to stick with. And on the issue of bills, of course, all of our utility bills are going up, including our water bills. And you might ask why. I mean, is it to make the pipes better and more secure so that we don't waste any water because, in case it's a bit warm for an extended period, if we get a sort of a heat wave or a drought? But no. It appears not. It appears that the pipes are leaking billions of litres every single day. The water companies are paying massive dividends, and I've got a real issue with it. And my next guest is Dr. Keith Baker, who's the co-founder of the Energy Poverty Research Initiative. A very good afternoon, Keith. Thanks for joining me on Tice Talk. So, we've got this news today. I mean, we know we've had an extended warm period, so I guess we shouldn't be surprised that water levels are low. But, I mean, these numbers of the waste of water through the pipes is pretty shocking, isn't it?
Afternoon, Richard. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the good things about living in Scotland, of course, our Scottish Water are effectively a public company, and their rates of satisfaction are through the roof. They're regularly 99% plus. Citizens' Advice up here says, we don't bother dealing with water because they're talking about. So, yeah, but this is a problem that's been going on for decades. We hear about the likes of Severn Trent, who notoriously just haven't invested in that infrastructure. So what we're getting now, of course, with the effects of climate change really starting to kick in, we get really dry periods, the heat waves that we've just had. I think there's another one on the way now. So that dries out the soil. And of course, when we get the downpours of rain, it just runs off. And we don't collect it. So we're not collecting it, and it's leaking out the pipes at the same time.
But, OK, I might just challenge you on the issue of running off. I mean, generally, it's running into reservoirs, and, OK, reservoirs are low at the moment. And you've raised a really interesting point. I talked earlier in the year, actually, and I used Scottish Water as a shining example because it is a not-for-profit business across the whole of Scotland, isn't it, Keith? And whereas in England and certainly in England, all of the water companies, they are for-profit. And it begs that really key question as to whether or not those dividend-paying for-profit companies, the utilities, critical national infrastructure, which is what water is that the right approach? And I think I'm right in saying Scottish Water actually have lower average bills than the rest of the UK as well.
Yeah, and we pay through our council tax rather than a separate bill as well. So, and their management of rainwater is so much better because they're integrated with the local authorities and the government. So when we're talking about planning for these sorts of events, there's a much more comprehensive process there. The whole thing actually works an awful lot better, and we've seen it in England and Wales with the privatisation and the splitting up of utilities. So water is a natural monopoly. So why shouldn't it be publicly owned?
Well, that's right. I've got real issues about the ownership of other parts of our ownership, like the electricity and the gas pipelines and things like that. Well, it's fantastic. It's great to, in a sense, we should be learning from part of the way that Scotland manages its utilities. So these, this loss of water through pipes, I mean, billions of litres a day. Where does that water go? I mean, is that water going back into reservoirs, Keith?
No.
Essentially, it's gone.
It's gone. Funnily enough, I'm just about to start teaching at Glasgow Caledonian. I teach about sustainable urban drainage systems. Now, that's a lot to get into to a short interview, but go away, viewers, go away and Google it. There's a lot of really good information out there on how other countries have managed it. I mean, I was in Birmingham yesterday, travelling back from seeing my mother, and we were out in the city centre, and fair play to the council, they've done a good job of redoing the city centre, but where were the trees? Where were the patches of grass? Where were sort of the porous road surfaces and pavements and stuff? In a lot of other countries, this is standard. They're used to dealing with it, and yet we just, for whatever reason, we just don't learn these lessons.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I guess in Scotland you're lucky, you do have a higher rainfall. But we've also got the issue down here, and I'd be interested in your take on this desalination plant that seems to have been created. It's slightly unclear, although it was opened by the late Duke of Edinburgh in 2010, it's unclear whether it's actually ever operated. And desalination plants are used in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East. You'd have thought a wealthy country like ours, we might have a bit of contingency backup.
Well, you would think so, and I think it's supposed to open next year now, but that seems to be a bit unclear as well. But the problem with desalination plants is they use a huge amount of energy.
But that's okay. That's okay, Keith, because we've got loads of our own energy. We've got shale gas under our feet. We've got gas in the North Sea. What's the problem?
Well, where's our rebed filtration systems and, using our natural environment to do this work for us? Why are we wasting energy on it? I mean, with energy bills going through the roof, and they are going to be going through the roof over the next, few months. Why are we using resources unnecessarily when nature can actually do a lot of this for us if we plan correctly?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, there's no question, sadly, that energy bills are going through the roof, and now Ofgem is going to be making quarterly changes to the cap. But just touching on that, I mean, in a sense, my concern, Keith, is that there's nothing in the foreseeable 3 or indeed 4 years in terms of the supply of energy that gives me much hope that they're likely to come down again. I think the government's being very naive in thinking this is a temporary spike.
Yeah, and I would say to people watching this now, this is going to get very, very scary. Martin Lewis a couple of weeks ago put out a superb video. The predictions for annual bills are going through the roof. I don't think it's unusual. It'd be unusual if in the next 6 months we see people with annual bills of over 5,000.
Wow, Martin, that's the worst I've heard.
Well, I'm starting to see those figures coming through now. Keep an eye on what he's saying, and if you're on Twitter, what Cornwall Insight are saying. They're revising their predictions up and up and up, and we are heading into very, very scary territory. And there's really not a lot of support out there for those who are going to be hit the hardest.
I mean, let's be clear, Keith. Those sort of levels are not sustainable.
No,
and will require a wholesale different form of thinking from the government, because otherwise we're into, I asked the question at the beginning of my show, what will you do if you cannot pay the bills? And we've been trying to give some advice. But I mean, when you get anywhere near those levels, millions of people will just say, can't pay, won't pay.
Well, there's certainly a movement. There's a campaign to stop paying bills starting on the 1st of October. I mean, obviously, I can't personally advocate that because I've got a professional responsibility.
No,
but those are the sorts of things
nor can we at Talk TV. But it's by talking about it in advance, that's how we've got to plan and come up with some solutions. And I guess my concern, and perhaps yours, is, we've got a complete vacuum of any form of government or leadership at the moment when we should be talking about real solutions to this.
Yeah, and I think it's actually too late now. Even if we had a massive windfall tax on energy companies tomorrow, I mean, how long would that take to get, for those savings to get through to bill payers? We've had the energy companies' obligation. That process has been delayed. We're just not going to, we're not going to be able to get that support to people. It's not going to happen. And I'm, Martin has been brilliant, and I think we absolutely have to raise the flag on this. This is going to happen. There are going to be people who are going to be struggling to pay their rents and their mortgages, let alone pay their energy bills.
Yeah, that's interesting, Keith. You say it's too late. I mean, look, the direction of travel of energy is happening. I don't accept that it's too late for the government to show some leadership. I mean, they created the furlough scheme in a couple of weeks. I mean, we could end up with the equivalent of a significant energy furlough scheme for some period of time.
Well, that's the sort of action that would be needed. And the only way you can fund that, of course, is by heavily taxing the energy companies, particularly the fossil fuel companies who've been making billions and billions out of what they do. And, yeah, you know, we do need to look at public ownership of energy.
Yeah, I think that's right. There is another people who are making a great deal more money than they expected to, Keith, and that's the owners of the offshore wind farms, because they're on RPI subsidised contracts, and the pricing they're getting is way higher than they ever thought. So should we put a windfall tax on the renewable firms making massive profits as well?
Actually, some of the biggest developers of offshore wind under the recent ScotWind auction are the likes of BP. So in some cases, they're one and the same companies.
Yes.
I think you've got to differentiate between the size of the company as well. You know, there are a lot of small 100% renewable companies who, you know, aren't playing the same silly games. So let's look at the profits. Let's look at how much they're paying their CEOs. Let's look at how much they're investing in community projects. You know, the likes of BP are notoriously bad at that sort of thing. So let's hit those guys, because they've got the money.
You know who's the biggest owner of all the offshore wind farms is?
Am I correct? It's the Crown State?
No, it's the Danish taxpayer through a company called Ørsted. It seems mad to me that we're paying huge profits to the Danish taxpayer. Keith, thank you so much for your thoughts. You can check that out. He's looking a bit concerned, but that is the reality. That was Dr. Keith Baker, the co-founder of the Energy Poverty Research Initiative, with his concerns, some of the scariest projections. Anyway, I'll be taking your calls, your thoughts, your views, what you think you can do if you can't pay the bills, suggestions to reduce your spending. Stay with us. We are, of course, here at Talk TV. We've got some great guests coming up. We've got to be talking about China and Taiwan. We have got to be also talking about numerous various other things, including, unbelievably, in the third hour, the surveillance society. I mean, you just couldn't make some of this stuff up. It really is very, very shocking. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends. It's the middle of the afternoon. It's 2:20, and it's Tice Talk. It is not Ian Collins. Ian is away today, but we've been talking about a variety of issues, including in that last bit about the water companies, the shortage of water. I thought it was interesting, but what is clear is that Neil in Hornsey did not think it was interesting. Neil said, sorry, Richard, but this is such a boring conversation about hosepipe ban. Who cares? It'll be raining in a couple of weeks. There'll be floods and all sorts. Well, maybe we probably do need a bit of rain, but there's none forecast, Neil. Anyway, there we go. Keep listening. We've got lots more interesting stuff. Whilst Dead as a Dodo, great, well, I'm not sure it is a great name, but anyway, Dead as a Dodo says, Richard, why do you want to keep giving free money away? Free money got us into the mess in the first place. Look, I don't want to give free money away. What I want to give is tax cuts to create growth on the basis that individuals and small businesses know how to spend a quid in the pocket better than some civil servant on your behalf. That's what I want to do. If you create growth, then you get higher wages and you get higher tax revenues. And sometimes you've actually got to stimulate. You've got to, in a sense, you've got to invest in growth by stimulating tax cuts and the right things. That's what I want to do. I don't want to give free money away. But businesses grow by borrowing in order to invest in the business, create some growth, create some value, and that's how you make more profits in the medium term. And the same applies to the government. You've got to invest in growth. And I'm afraid the suggestions from Rishi Sunak's camp that you can tax your way out of a crisis is utterly ludicrous. But there we go. Let's head to Ipswich, where Alan is on the line, who may have a view on this or something else. Good afternoon, Alan.
Afternoon, Richard. You're so much better than the other bloke who normally does this show.
Oh, don't tell Ian. We'll get in terrible trouble.
Anyway, reason I was ringing in. Given the state of the country that it is in at the moment, with not anything working in the country, the NHS is in crisis again. When aren't they? Blah, blah, blah. The economy, cost of living, etc., etc., etc. There's train strikes, blah, blah, blah. The government are on holiday. Shouldn't Parliament actually now be recalled?
That's a really good question, but don't panic, Alan, because the great Jacob Rees-Mogg, that very contemporary, beautifully dressed figure, he reassured us the other morning, because he told Julia that, don't worry, it's fine, because our Test cricket team is doing quite well, so we shouldn't be worried about other things not working. Did that reassure you?
No, the cricket's not doing well either. They lost the other week.
Yeah, they did indeed. I think you're right, actually. I think there's a complete vacuum of leadership. We've got another 4 weeks of this, and I just think it's completely unacceptable. You've got what I think is the gravest statement that I can recall being made by the Governor of the Bank of England in my working lifetime, and I'm getting a bit long in the tooth, and the government's away on holiday.
It should be recalled, but it won't, because it's their holiday. God forbid. Also, immigration. I want to know where all these people are staying when they're on holiday. Who's looking after the immigration side of things when they're on holiday?
Well, they're in these 4-star hotels dotted around the country, Alan. That's where they all are.
How many hotels do we have that are actually now full up? Where will they go?
That's a great question, and we should be asking the government. They seem rather reluctant to tell us. Alan, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's Alan. He says that Parliament should be recalled, but then we haven't really got a Prime Minister to recall Parliament, have we? That's a bit of a problem, because the Prime Minister's on holiday. He's just had a party. There's a vacuum. What happens in a vacuum? Bad things happen in a vacuum. Let's go up to Manchester from Ipswich, where Jackie's on the line. Hi, Jackie. How are you doing?
Sort of surviving.
Surviving.
I've not had... I got me increase in April in my energy bill, and it went up to £358 a month.
What a shocker.
Yes. So I've not had the heating on since April. I am disabled. I do feel the cold, but it's a case of I'm trying to, build up credit so that when the cap comes again in October, I hopefully won't feel the impact as much as it's predicted.
Well done. So you're saving now, Jackie, in the warmer weather. Yeah. And I think that's the right thing to do. and you've got to check your thermostats and things. And I suspect, Jackie, like millions of others, you're sort of thinking, what can you do post-October to try and stay warm?
And also, my fixed-rate mortgage comes off in October as well, so we've had none of the increases from last year. So I am getting really, really scared about what is happening and where this is going to go.
And Jackie, have you started to speak to your mortgage lender already about options after October for your fixed rate?
Well, I mean, I listened to the advice before, and it may well be that we will have to take the mortgage over a longer period of time to try and
you should. My advice definitely would be to try and start talking to them as sooner rather than later, so that you can sort of work it out and plan it. They can give you some options, and who knows where interest rates will be in October. So, Jackie, definitely get in touch with them and look at all those options. And my best wishes to you. Thank you very much for calling. Do stay listening. We'll give as many tips and ideas as we can. We've got to help where we can. We're going to head to back to Essex, where Edwin is on the line. Good afternoon, Edwin. What's on your mind?
Oh, good afternoon, Richard. Your first caller from Orpington was really on the subject regarding reducing fuel tax. I'm looking at page 4 of the Metro on Monday the 1st of August, and it gives a list. Number 1 is Germany, and reduction in petrol tax 25.1 pence, making the average price 154p per litre. We're down at number 12 with a 5p reduction, making our average price 186p per litre.
You're so right. And Howard Cox has written a brilliant article in The Sun today. I mean, I just think that once again our government is being reactive where other governments are being proactive.
Because the thing is, this would have an immediate effect on inflation.
Exactly.
What the politicians are talking about in these Prime Minister debates, they're pushing things that take time. I mean, when you think like a reduction of 1p in the pound taking place next year, that does nothing.
But Edwin, that's fine. Rishi Sunak thinks you can wait 7 years before he cuts his taxes. Is that okay?
No, it's not. And the other thing is, what about taking away the green levy?
Ah, exactly. And guess what that will do? That'll cut taxes. That'll cut inflation as well, Edwin.
And this is the main thing, is getting inflation down immediately before it has an effect on everything else that we do.
Exactly. Edwin, you are so right. Stay with us. That is absolutely right. We will keep banging the drum. I've been talking about this for weeks and weeks and weeks. It's about time someone in government actually started to listen, because other people know, it seems to me, a little bit more than they do. They're taking way too long. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Thanks to those great callers. Coming up after the break, we've got to talk about the big geopolitical issues, Taiwan, China, what's going on, what we should be aware of. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV.
Just when you think you've read it all, gender activists want scientists to stop categorising ancient human remains as either male or female. Clearly, anatomically, you can tell if it's a male skeleton or a female skeleton. These woke archaeologists are labelling them as non-binary or gender-neutral. What message does it send to kids who are studying history? It's absolute nonsense, isn't it? Join me, David Bull, for incisive political comment, analysis and, of course, some fun here on Talk TV.
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. The Bank of England has predicted that the UK is heading towards a long recession starting this winter. They say there'll be 5 consecutive quarters of economic downturn, which would make it the longest since the 2008 financial crisis. Inflation is now predicted to peak at 13% early next year. In response, the bank has raised interest rates by 0.5% to 1.75%. The governor of the Bank of England says it would hit the poorest the hardest.
This is a very uncomfortable situation to be in. We're very aware of the impact it has, therefore, on those who are least well off. If we don't bring inflation back to target, bearing in mind the huge scale of the energy shock we're seeing, if we don't bring it back to target, and if we get these so-called second-round effects entering in, it's going to get worse. And it will get worse precisely, I'm afraid, for those who are least well off in society.
It says Ofgem has confirmed the energy price cap will be updated 4 times a year instead of every 6 months. The energy regulator has warned that customers face a very challenging winter ahead and said the price cap will have to rise to stop more energy suppliers from going bust and prevent instability in the market. Rishi Sunak has said that Liz Truss's tax policies will only stoke inflation. It's ahead of another debate tonight. Truss has disagreed and said to Sunak that we cannot tax our way to growth and said her tax cuts wouldn't be inflationary. And Archie Battersby's life support was not withdrawn early this morning after his parents submitted a request to have him moved to a hospice. Archie's doctors say it's too risky to move him, but his family insists that they should be allowed to choose where the 12-year-old spends his last moments. Well, that's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk and a very good afternoon. I'm standing in for the great Ian Collins this afternoon. It's not Sunday, don't panic. You haven't fallen asleep and missed a couple of days. But we have been talking all sorts. We're talking about what happens if you can't pay your bills, the breaking news about the Bank of England increasing interest rates from 1.25% to 1.75%. So much going on here, but also so much really massive things, geopolitical things going on around the world. And I'm not talking about the war in Ukraine. I'm talking actually about what's going on in the South China Sea and around Taiwan, because we had, of course, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, making an unprecedented visit to Taiwan in the last couple of days, and it's fair to say that has provoked a serious reaction from China. So I'm delighted to be joined now by Rick Glauert, the reporter at the Taiwan Plus report in Taiwan. A very good evening to you, Rick, because I know it's not sort of the middle of the evening to you. Thanks for joining me on Tice Talk. And, you know, obviously this is a pretty tense time, I guess, in and around Taiwan. How much more serious is this than other exercises that China from time to time conducts?
Well, this is much more serious. This is pretty much unprecedented. The amount of missiles that have been sent into the waters around Taiwan, we've seen 11 today. Also the distance from Taiwan that these missiles have been landing. These have been landing very close to Taiwan's territorial waters. So this all makes it very unprecedented and unlike other military drills that China does routinely do in these areas, yes.
And to what extent do you think this is a direct consequence of Pelosi's visit, or is it a convenient excuse for them to ramp it up a bit? Or do you think actually they really are seriously thinking about the unthinkable?
I think it's quite clear that China is doing this as a direct response to Pelosi's visit this week. Obviously, Beijing and Xi Jinping and people in the Chinese Communist Party made a number of threats ahead of her visit, warning her not to come. They said there would be resolute actions, that it was an infringement on their sovereignty, these sort of rhetoric. They promised there would be a reaction to her visit if she did land on the island, and she did, and this is the consequence. But at the same time, if you look at the type of military exercises that China is doing, it effectively is a blockade of the island of Taiwan. We've seen there's 6 different live-fire drill areas around Taiwan, mainly located around major ports, making maritime traffic very difficult. This might be a tactic that China would use in the first stages of an invasion of Taiwan. And so I think it's a bit of both, yes.
And what's the mood of the people? Are the people, are they cross with Pelosi for coming, or actually do they appreciate the sort of implicit support from the US?
Well, Pelosi was mainly welcomed. You know, there was a lot of people waiting at the airport, waiting at her hotel to welcome her. We saw the Taipei 101, which is the largest building here in Taipei, in the capital of Taiwan, light up, welcoming her with an American flag. This visit was mainly welcomed by people here in Taiwan. You know, we've seen relations between Taiwan and the US warming over the last few years, and this is seen as another sign that the US does have Taiwan's back, and that their relationship is going to continue to grow.
I mean, that's really interesting that that actually her visit is welcome, because there's obviously a question as to whether or not she actually had this sort of implicit support or not from the US President Joe Biden. He obviously couldn't be seen to explicitly support it, but I think that's fascinating, actually. I probably didn't expect that.
Well, yes, I think a lot of this, there's a bit of US politics that goes into this, because obviously the Congress is separate from the White House, so Pelosi made her own decision to come, despite the fact that, as you said, Biden was not supportive of it vocally, and also we heard there was warnings that it wasn't a great time from other institutions in the US. But I think you need to look a bit at Pelosi and her history. She has been a vocal critic of China and its human rights record for decades. She visited Tiananmen Square after the crackdown on the democratic protests there in the early 90s.
That's right. She's always had a long-standing interest, and it's sort of her swan song, because she's about to retire, isn't she?
Exactly, and you can also see that in her itinerary of her trip here. Yesterday, she went to the National Human Rights Museum here in Taipei, and she met with Chinese activists that are now in exile here in Taiwan, human rights activists from Taiwan, and also human rights activists from Hong Kong, yeah.
Indeed. Rick, thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. That was Rick Glauert, the reporter at the Taiwan Plus report. Fascinating that the Taiwanese population actually appreciative, from what Rick was saying, of that visit from the Speaker of the House of Representatives. We're going to head straight now to former Conservative MP, former Defence Minister for the Conservative government back in about 2010. So Gerard Harrath is on the line. Good afternoon, Gerard. Very good to have you with us on Tice Talk. It's normally on a Sunday, but it's a Thursday. This is pretty serious and troubling times, isn't it? I mean, we've never really seen this level of action by the Chinese. How concerned are you with what's going on?
Well, Richard, always great to speak to you, great man, and lovely to be on your programme. I'm extremely concerned, but we should not be surprised at what is happening. This is the consequence of years of complacency, naivety, and weakness on the part of the West. I have been warning for years that following the invasion of the siege of Crimea by Putin in 2014, we should expect him to take further action, particularly to create a land link from Russia through the Donbass to Crimea. And the failure of the West to respond, the catastrophic retreat from Kabul initiated by a weak US President Biden last year, almost a year ago now, these are green signals to dictators around the world, and therefore we should not be surprised that Xi Jinping, the communist leader of China, People's Republic of China, is following up on his declared ambition to recover Taiwan from independence by 2050.
So, Gerald, was Pelosi wise to do this? I mean, it's pretty provocative at a time when everybody's very focused and trying to help Ukraine. I mean, look, the timing sort of couldn't be worse.
No, I take a completely contrary view, Richard. I'm no fan of Nancy Pelosi, but I have to say that I think this was a very timely and wise move, because we have for too long allowed President Putin to act with impunity, and I have said repeatedly that our failure to address Putin's aggression would encourage and embolden other dictators around the world. And that is precisely what is happening in China versus Taiwan. The provocation came not from Taiwan, not from Nancy Pelosi. The provocation came very clearly from Xi Jinping, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, who declared that he was determined to eliminate the democratically controlled country of the
and of course, Gerald, the timing couldn't be worse for us here in the UK because we haven't really got a government. We haven't got an effective Prime Minister, and we've got a Foreign Secretary that's quite busy trying to become Prime Minister.
Well, that's entirely true, Richard. Fortunately, it's not actually going to be that drawn out a process as some of us.
It's another 4 weeks, Gerald. I want it done tomorrow.
It's another 4 weeks. But, Richard, I have to tell you that our observant opponents recognise that come August, the West goes on holiday.
I'm not.
Well, you're not, but I am actually speaking to you from the very blisteringly hot south of France, where I'm staying with my wonderful French brother-in-law, doing a bit, of course, missionary work on Brexit, as you will understand.
Excellent.
As you and I are mutual campaigners on this front.
But seriously, it is a problem for us because in the UK, because we've got essentially a vacuum of government.
I don't think we've got a vacuum of government, and the civil service keeps, of course, things running. But yes, in terms of political leadership, we do have a diversion, a distraction in the form of the leadership election campaign. But nevertheless, I do actually think that Liz Truss has been pretty good in being robust on some of these foreign policy issues. And of course, you and I are both concerned to scrap the Northern Ireland Protocol, and she's been very robust on that. She's been very robust on China. So let us hope that the civil servants are taking note and doing what the minister will have made clear is government policy, which is to be robust in terms of challenging these undemocratic, totalitarian regimes which are flexing their muscles. Richard, I just make this point. For 10 years, I've been warning that China has been militarizing the uninhabited parts of the South China Sea.
I've got to run to the break. Thank you so much for your thoughts. There's Gerald Howarth. He thinks that this is the right time for Pelosi's visit. Stay with us. We'll be taking your calls, your thoughts, and your messages after the break. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk. Yes, I'm standing in for the brilliant Ian Collins this afternoon until 4 o'clock, and then it's Dr. David Bull. We've been talking about a range of issues. We've been talking about what happens if you can't pay the bills, about the rising interest rates, and we looked at the hosepipe ban that upset Neil, but there we are. Nevertheless, it's important. It's all part of the bills. And the top tip so far really is if you're worried that you can't pay your bills, talk to the companies, talk to the lenders early. That is really important. We've got a great tip here from Benedict, who says, top tips from me: buy warm winter gear now whilst it's out of season, more likely to be on a sale, or buy last season's winter gear, much cheaper. Get draft excluders, radiators off in rooms that aren't used, shut the doors. Buy higher tog bedding, very technical. Don't use summer bedding in the cold. Benedict, fantastic top tips there. Thank you for that. Meanwhile, as we were talking there with Gerard Howarth and with Rick Lowett on the geopolitical issues going on in Taiwan, Jim from Newcastle brilliantly reminds me that the Taiwan situation is not new. Jim was one of a number of people updating their battle tanks back in 1999, 23 years ago, as they were convinced even then that China was going to invade. Well, let's hope in 23 years' time they still have not invaded. We'll take a couple of calls now. We're going to head to Bedfordshire, glorious Bedfordshire, where Jeff is on the line. Good afternoon to you.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Well, of all the things that are going on in this country, I only want to talk to you today about water.
Excellent.
And just, I sit sort of aghast, I suppose, of what we get fed, but it's just excuses all the time. And I just want to know, why have we sold all these water companies to, well, a majority of them, to foreign companies and venture capitalists? I mean, you know, and I know, our MPs and the people behind them don't really understand negotiations of contracts. And where are the clauses if they fail, like they've done with the railway companies, where they can just take them back? We shouldn't be giving compensation. We just take them back into government holding and, you know, make sure that we get things right. I mean, I was in France a few weeks ago, and I go over there, you know, for holidays and what have you. And over the years, I've noticed they've been building large canals which transfer water across the whole of their country, I believe. And I just wonder how many of those I've paid for, because the sure fact is we're investing in HS2 and Europe are investing in better water supplies.
Yeah, I mean, look, your point is a really, really good one, Jeff. I've had deep concerns about the fact that we sold off in England and Wales most of the critical national infrastructure of our utilities, whether it's the electricity companies, whether it's the electricity grid, whether it's the gas distribution networks, and whether it's the water companies. And actually, it's interesting what in Scotland, Scottish Water is not for profit, and I think it's a real serious problem that we face. It's not a coincidence that Scottish water bills are lower than across the rest of England, and far too many of these utility companies are now overseas owned. And I did some work a number of months ago. I'm going to update it. I mean, they're making off, and they're literally racketeering and profiteering. They're making huge profits. It's, you know, it's. Would you favour some form, Jeff, of renationalisation of some or all of our utility companies?
Well, I never thought I'd say yes, but yes, I do. You know? I just can't believe the amount of money we're putting into HS2 over the next... And I drive... I'm 70, but I go out, you know, I'm not one that sits in a chair all day, except I am today. And I'm not being funny, but you drive across the country and it's all being dug up for HS2. Well, I know for a fact where I live, the younger people are working from home. Why? Because they're more productive. I know people say, oh, that's not right. It's only not right in London to pay for the coffee shops and all the other things going on. But over the next 20, 25 years, we've got a white elephant on our hands again, haven't we?
Oh, I think so. And I think that there's every prospect that what they call a sort of 100 billion project could become a 200 billion project. Jeff, great call. Thank you so much. There's Jeff, and he can't believe he's saying it, but actually he's like me. He might say, do you know, we actually probably have got to renationalise part of our utilities so that you can get what I call a win-win situation. You can get the best of private sector management, but also we, the taxpayer, the customer, are not going to be ripped off by foreign-owned profiteering. But let's see what Keith in Eastbourne says. Good afternoon, Keith.
Oh, good afternoon, Richard. The thing that bothers me with this country is that we don't seem to be attacking the real problem. The real problem is to get enough cash to stop kids from being freezing cold this winter and people having trouble feeding themselves. So you never see the BBC ever talk about fracking. You know, the last time I read about that, it was about 50 years worth of gas there that they knew of. They just seem to forget that it's sitting there waiting to give us what we require to get rid of winters like we're going to have next time. And the other thing is the amount of money they spend on promoting smart meters, which everybody I know who's had one, he just throws it in the back of the cupboard and barely looks at it, maybe for the first 2 weeks, but they spent billions on that. So there's all that money that could be accumulated. Supplements that they put onto turbines. I don't think there's a turbine turning in this country that hasn't been supplemented. I think the last time was £112 per bill.
When you say supplemented, you mean subsidised with extra revenue?
Yeah, they don't. In other words, they don't necessarily pay for themselves.
Oh, well, that's right. I mean, not only that, but these subsidies, Keith, they're inflation linked, so they're making off handsomely.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. So we're throwing money away, all in the in the interest of this climate change sort of dogma that we put through. Now, when you read that we represent about 1% of the world's pollution, it seems a hell of a cost that kids have got to go hungry and go through cold winters just so that the rest of China and that can keep on building coal-fired power stations.
So, Keith, do you think that if we lead by example, do you think that the likes of China and India and Russia will follow our shining example and follow us to net zero, or do you think they'll laugh at us?
You've only got to see what China are doing today in Taiwan. They don't give a damn, do they?
Well, do you know, Keith, I actually had a bit of a row yesterday with some of the Stop Fossil Fuel climate protesters in central London. And, yeah, they seem to think we're all global citizens and that we shouldn't be so selfish.
But we're not global citizens, are we? We're the UK, you know, and you've got minority groups dictating policies as far as I'm concerned.
You're so right, Keith. You are so right. Great call from Eastbourne, where Keith, he is like me. He says we should start fracking. We should think about British citizens. We're not global citizens. We love our great country and we should protect our country and our own children's future. But let's go up from Eastbourne to York, where Mike's on the line. Hi, Mike.
Good afternoon, Richard. How are you?
Well, I'm struggling a bit with the shocking news earlier, but I'm doing my best. How are you in York?
Brilliant. I think the word here, the key word here is resources. I mean, like water resource, it's become so much frugal since they've built all the houses and no more water sources.
That's right. So it's a valuable resource, and we should be in a sense making sure that we can keep it and not lose it down the pipes.
But it's also a very valuable excuse. And I say that in so much as, have you ever heard of Operation Augusta?
No. Help us.
Okay. Operation Augusta was Ashton-under-Lyne in 2003, September, where they'd been dealing with grooming gangs. This is 2003. They were dealing with grooming
We've
gangs.
got a minute. Is it a quickie?
Yep. Through a lack of resources, they dropped the whole inquiry.
Right.
And 22 years later, you've still got, in Ashton-under-Lyne and in Oldham, gang grooming, and the Labour MPs sit in those seats.
Well, I talked about that. You may have heard back on Sunday, Mike, and we will keep talking about it because you're absolutely right. This is still going on. And all these resources, they're precious. We've got to use them properly and efficiently. Thank you very much. That was Mike in York. He's concerned about the lack of proper use of our resources, whether it's water resources. You know, if we're losing all this money leaking out of pipes, and as we heard earlier from Keith, actually, once it's gone like that, then it may well be gone. It doesn't get back to the reservoirs, which is absolutely critical. Stay with us. We've got loads coming up in our third and final hour. You've been listening to the home of common sense. It's Tice Talk. It is Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 3.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. The Bank of England has predicted that the UK is heading towards a long recession starting this winter. They say there will be 5 consecutive quarters of economic downturn, which would make it the longest since the 2008 financial crisis. Well, inflation is now predicted to peak at 13% early next year. Well, in response, the bank has raised interest rates by 0.5% to 1.75%. The governor of the Bank of England largely blamed Russia's actions in Ukraine for the crisis. He warned it would hit the poor the hardest.
This is a very uncomfortable situation to be in. We're very aware of the impact it has, therefore, on those who are least well off. If we don't bring inflation back to target, bearing in mind this huge scale of the energy shock we're seeing, if we don't bring it back to target, and if we get these so-called second-round effects entering in, it's going to get worse. And it will get worse precisely, I'm afraid, for those who are least well off in society.
Well, it says Ofgem has confirmed the energy price cap will be updated 4 times a year instead of every 6 months. The energy regulator has warned that customers face a very challenging winter ahead. They said the price cap will have to rise to stop more energy suppliers from going bust and prevent instability in the market. Economist Jack Leslie says although it will be tough, the government must help bring down those costs.
I think it's really difficult. I mean, we need to recognise that, the government doesn't have an easy job here, and, they don't have an easy tool to cut energy prices. So what the measures they need to take are the ones that are kind of most efficient on protecting.
Rishi Sunak has said that Liz Truss's tax policies will only stoke inflation. It's ahead of another debate tonight. Truss has disagreed and said to Sunak that we cannot tax our way to growth and said her tax cuts wouldn't be inflationary. And Archie Battersby's life support was not withdrawn this morning after his parents submitted a request to have him moved to a hospice. Archie's doctors say it's too risky to move him, but his family insists that they should be allowed to choose where the 12-year-old spends his last moments. His mother, Holly Dance, told Times Radio that she's heartbroken.
It's going to be awful today. I woke up feeling absolutely sick. My stomach, I just feel like this hospital, we've got so much to answer for.
Well, that's the latest. Now time for today's weather.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV Weather.
Hello, good afternoon. Less hot today, less humid as well, and that was noticeable through last night. So we saw a cold front work its way southwards, introducing more of a northerly, fresher airflow. And that's because we've got high pressure nudging in from the west for the rest of the week. It's high pressure that dominates the scene, allowing for that cooler northerly airflow, although temperatures will be around average for the time of year, but also allowing for largely fine and dry conditions, which is not great news for parts of the south where the rain is desperately needed. Parts of the north, though, for this afternoon will continue to see some wet weather in the form of showers across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, perhaps a few into the North Midlands. But to the south of that, it stays mostly dry with bright or sunny spells. And although temperatures lower than yesterday, around average for the time of year, up to around 25 degrees Celsius in the south and up into the high teens further north. Overnight, some of the showers will fade away, but some will continue across the far northwest of the UK. It stays mostly dry and clear. It will be quite a cool night compared to recently, especially noticeable around rural spots of Scotland, only a few degrees above freezing. Then for tomorrow, we do it all again. Once again, it's going to be another mostly fine and dry day across many areas, but showers will continue to affect northern and western areas of the UK. Warm again as well.
Times Puzzles sponsors Talk TV Weather.
If you want to work a 4-day week, hop off to Norway or somewhere, because that's what they do there. We're not doing it here. This is Great Britain. Join the Independent Republic of Mike Graham tomorrow from 10.
Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk. We have flown into the third and final hour of my show. I'm standing in for Ian Collins this afternoon at 4 o'clock. The good doctor, Dr. David Bull, will be on until 7. And then, of course, we've got the news desk with Tom Newton-Dunn. And then at 8, Jeremy Kyle. He is so happy back in the TV studio. We'll be talking to him a bit later. But as if we haven't got enough challenging news with increasing energy bills, increasing interest rates, and a difficult winter, and the worst forecast I've ever heard from a governor of the Bank of England, we've got cities up and down the country thinking that this is a really good idea to increase the surveillance of us good citizens so that they can increase the fines if we don't comply with congestion charges, clean air zones and the like. And you just sort of think, when does this end? I mean, I think there's about 9 cities that are considering new clean air zones. And of course, here in London, we've had the congestion charge, and then we had ULEZ last year. And now the mayor of London, democratically elected, fine, he thinks it's a good idea to increase the congestion zone and he wants to put up even more cameras. But there may be some good news, and I'm delighted to be joined now by Keith Prince, who's the Deputy Chairman of the London Transport Committee and the Conservative Assembly Member for Havering and Redbridge. Good afternoon, Keith. Thanks for joining me on Tice Talk this afternoon. It looks very sunny there. Are you away on holiday, or is that the lovely Havering and Redbridge?
No, it's a bit further into the city. I'm in Stratford, actually, on the Olympic Park.
Oh, fantastic. Well,
I really recommend to people to come down. It's a wonderful place.
It is indeed. It is indeed. Thanks for being with us, Keith. So, there's some extraordinary news just announced that the Surveillance Commissioner himself, Professor Fraser Sampson, he may think that the use of these automatic number plate recognition cameras may actually be a real question of the legality for their use against road users. What's going on here? What's the latest? Is this some good news for drivers?
Well, hopefully it is. We are the most watched people in the world in London. There are more cameras per person in London than anywhere else in the world. But what's happening here is that the authorities are really abusing that power that they have, because they are releasing these images to the police. They're now giving police access to these images. So if you and I are driving, minding our own business in our cars, it's not just the number plate that these AMP cameras are picking up, it's the full image of the car. So then they can see who you're with, when you're with them. And I think that's a real invasion of people's privacy, and that's what the Commissioner is also considering as well.
I mean, it sounds horrific, and describing them with limited evidence it would benefit society. I mean, at what point do we say, actually, enough's enough, we just shouldn't tolerate this? I mean, you might expect this in China, you don't expect it in the United Kingdom.
Well, I agree with you 100%. OK, perhaps, yes, if I'm committing an offence, if I'm driving down the wrong way down a road, or I'm parking in the wrong place, or I'm in a bus lane or something, then by all means share my number plate. But there's no way that people have got the right to see who I'm with at any one given time if I'm not committing a crime, if I'm not doing anything wrong. And this is the thing. Historically, the police have been able to ask for this imagery if they suspect there's a crime having been committed. But now they're having free access to this imagery. That's 100% wrong. You know, you have the right to be with whoever you want to be in a public place without others watching what you're doing for no reason.
And Keith, whose decision is this? Is this the Mayor's decision, or is it someone else?
It's the Mayor who's released these images or given free access to the police of these images, and I think that's totally wrong.
And
totally wrong.
Does he genuinely have the authority to do that within his terms of reference?
Well, he has the power to release the imagery. Of course, the question is he legally allowed to do that? And that's where the Commissioner is looking at this now. And I think it's a good thing that we have this Commissioner who can, sometimes we think it's all a bit too far, but this is a good example of where the Commissioner is performing a good function in saying, well, hang on, I'm not sure if actually that doesn't cross the line on what is legally allowed. Because, yes, as I've said before, you can use the number plates, or perhaps if the crime's been committed, the police can ask for access of the imagery, but the fact that they can just dip in and dip out whenever they like, that's, you know, we don't live in a police state. The police rule by consent, and if we're going to lose that trust in the police, that's not a good thing.
And if we can just extend the conversation, please, Keith, to, I gather that the Mayor of London now is looking to extend the ULEZ even further and increase the charge to £180 for non-payment of the fine. Does he not realise there's a cost of living crisis and it affects the poorest the most?
Well, it just goes to show what a poor mayor he is, because the Mayor of Manchester has ruled out bringing in a ULEZ charge. He says, yes, Manchester does need to improve its air quality. It does need to reduce the number of cars going through Manchester, but he's actually said now is not the time, because with all the pressures on the poor people, and let's just remember, it's only those who are unable to afford a new car, sorry, plane going past there, it's only those unable to afford a new car who are going to be hit by this. So it's those who are less well off, those least able to afford it, they're the ones who are going to be hit by this. And I think it's ironic that a socialist mayor should look to be putting more pressure on those least able to afford the increases we're finding in other areas and put more pressure on them at this moment in time. It's morally wrong, absolutely morally wrong, and something you would not expect from a socialist.
It is extraordinary, but then he's got a track record of doing this, and I was going to talk about, in Manchester, at least they have actually paused this clean air zone, even though they had actually up there, they had actually installed all of the cameras and got ready for it.
This is not political, because I will say that in Manchester, and the guy's Labour, so he's not from my party, I would say that they've got a mayor who cares in Manchester. Clearly, this guy, who we have in London, doesn't care. It's just about, give me the money, give me the money, give me the money.
Well, he's made so many mistakes. Of course, he does rather need his money, doesn't he, to keep TfL and things going.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Keith Prince, thank you so much for joining me from Stratford, the glorious Stratford. Keith is the Deputy Chairman of the London Transport Committee and Conservative Assembly Member for Havering and Redbridge. Well, there we are. So we've got the London Mayor looking to make people who are struggling struggle even more, with even more fines. I mean, I just think it's utterly tone-deaf, utterly selfish and appalling. But let's go to Newcastle, where Ross is on the line. What news, Ross?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. I just want to speak about a friend of mine. Actually, he lives up in Scotland, and he's not actually paid the gas and electric for 8 years.
He hasn't paid his bills for 8 years?
Yep, it hasn't been cut off. They haven't fitted a prepaid meter because the energy supplier does not believe in prepaid meters. He gets the bill in every month, puts it in the bin. He sent me a copy of it on a message a couple of months ago, and I think it was about £9,000 he owed them.
Right. Well, I'm sort of semi-speechless, actually, Ross. I don't quite understand. And obviously, we can't advocate people not paying their bills.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely genuine, true. I mean, I've seen it, and I don't know how it actually, people don't believe me when I tell them, but I can tell you for 100% it's true.
Goodness me. Well, that's pretty extraordinary. But, I mean, you and your friends, how much chat is there? How concerned are you finding it and your friends finding it in terms of the sort of the torrent of bill increases?
Well, he doesn't seem to mind because he's not paying it.
No, but other friends of yours in and around Newcastle?
Yeah, around about this area, people are very concerned. A lot of people I know here are really struggling with, especially food prices and energy prices, and there's seems to be a downturn in the local pub as well. Sometimes pub in there at the weekend, it seems to be very quiet now, so it's definitely taking a toll on businesses as well.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good at all. Ross, thank you so much for your thoughts. That's Ross from Newcastle, so highlighting just how concerned, although he's got a friend in Scotland who doesn't seem to be paying his bills. Let's be clear, we're not advocating that, and I have just double-checked. If you don't pay your utility bills, energy bills, then the obligation is to try and resolve the situation with your supplier. Ultimately, they are within their rights to cut off your supply, but that is very much a last resort, and they've got an obligation to try and resolve it with you and to try and find a solution. And that's what I'm saying, is look forwards, and if you know you've got problems, then talk to your suppliers, talk to your lenders, and try and find ways to work it through. We've quickly got time for Ken in Southend-on-Sea. Good afternoon, Ken.
Good afternoon, Richard.
What's on your mind?
Going back to your the Bank of England interest rate, going back to my city days, I don't know if you knew a guy called Lee J. Pemberton.
Yes, I do indeed. Golly, that's a long time ago.
It is. That was my city days. And it was always said then that you used to have 5 years of high interest rates and high mortgage rates and 5 years of low interest rates and low mortgage rates. That's the way the system worked. Then we got Mr. Cameron in, who put Mark Carney, I believe he was from Canada,
yes,
as the Bank of England governor. And out the blue, we start seeing 10 years of low interest rates.
Yes, I'm worried about where you're going with this now, Ken.
Well, all I'm saying is, if it's not broken, don't fix it. If you've had a system of 5-year growth, 5-year downturn, why would you change something that's always been in place and always worked? Sorry, Richard.
I thought, Ken, you were about to say we're now going to face 10 years of higher interest rates.
Well, no, I'm just wondering if this is the big reason, the bigger picture, as to why we're having all the problems with the cost of living. And
yes, no, Ken, it's a really good question. I think what you're saying is actually they left raising the interest rates too long, and essentially, and of course, they printed hundreds of billions of pounds during the COVID crisis, during the pandemic. Thank you very much for that. Ken, we've got just time for one message here. When will the government pull their finger out? We need everything on our doorstep to be self-sufficient. We should be using the empty fields. We should be fracking. This is from Adam. And we've got gas in the North Sea. We've become bone idle as a nation when other countries and expect other countries to provide us at great cost. Adam, I think, is quite right. We should be much more self-reliant, much more self-sufficient, whether it's food, whether it's our energy, whether it's our own creative brilliance. We can do this stuff, folks. We shouldn't outsource it elsewhere. That's what I believe in. You're listening to Tice Talk, and it is Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk here. It's 3:20 on Thursday. No, it's not Sunday, it's Thursday. I'm standing in for Ian Collins. We've got 40 minutes before the great Dr. David Bull takes you through Drive. Later this hour, we'll be talking to Jeremy Kyle, who is so excited in his big new TV studio. He's standing in for Piers Morgan through the month. Well, amongst all the doom and gloom, there is actually a little bit of good news out there. The front page of the Daily Mail confirms that actually the Attorney General and a former leadership candidate for the Tory party, Suella Braverman, she is launching a fight back against the woke warriors and against the extraordinary amount of time and money that has been spent by hundreds or thousands of lawyers in her department on training for just some absurd things. Let's just listen to her discussion with Julia Hartley-Brewer this morning.
I was horrified when I saw what was going on in my department, that last year alone almost 2,000 man-hours by qualified lawyers was spent on diversity and inclusion training. And I looked at the training materials and I was very sad at what very intelligent, fair-minded, professional people were being taught. This training stuff was based on a premise that someone like me, an Asian woman from a working-class background, must necessarily be a victim, must necessarily be oppressed, must necessarily be a victim of white privilege and white fragility, as I saw in this training material. I was horrified. We don't need to spend taxpayers' money on this stuff. We don't need to create a further climate of division. It achieves exactly the aim that it's purporting to achieve. Instead of uniting us, it's actually dividing us.
I mean, that was actually a great, extraordinary interview, really, from Suella Braverman. I mean, very clearly and boldly speaking out against just not only the waste of money, not only the waste of time, but who ever thought that we needed this stuff? And where's the application of common sense? It goes back to what I was saying in my Thursday thought right at the beginning of the show. Stuff takes too long. And if these public servants, if these civil servants are faffing around, wasting time on that sort of woke stuff, it's not surprising that stuff takes too long, is it? Let's talk to Harry Phone, who's at the Taxpayers Alliance on this, who do a brilliant job just holding the civil service and government to account about spending our cash, because it is our cash, properly, wisely and smartly. Harry, a very good afternoon. Thanks for joining Tice Talk. So there we are then. We've got thousands of hours on woke lessons, on diversity, equality, amongst smart, intelligent lawyers that surely don't need it.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show, Richard. I mean, look, the first thing to say from the outset, of course, racism and discrimination of any kind in British society is completely unacceptable. But I think, as Ms. Braverman, touched on there, this diversity training claims to be about solidarity, but it seems to do, the exact opposite. It highlights, or it seems to highlight the difference between everyone. And not to put words in her mouth, but essentially the article, brands it it's anti-common sense. And it's anti-freedom of speech. And of course, the worst thing about this, as she alluded to, 2,000 hours just in her department of qualified lawyers' time being dedicated to this. And, as we all know, lawyers are not cheap. And when you consider that taxpayers are suffering under a 70-year high tax burden, we have a cost of living crisis. This is not the sort of thing we expect civil servants to be focusing their time on. They should be focusing on the key priorities.
And so, I mean, the constant waste of government money. I'm concerned, actually, that these two leadership candidates, they're not talking enough about this when they talk about tax cuts and the ability to get through. Let me just show you a picture of a new zebra crossing that has been sent to me today. Just take a look, folks, at this. I mean, this is in High Street, Kensington, in central London. I mean, it looks more like some form of chessboard. Or, someone's new curtain. But that is a zebra crossing in central London that's presumably cost, it's been cost thousands of pounds. For those who are listening, not watching, it's just a series of, I think it's almost blue and white, squares and triangles, that's in the it's the size of a zebra crossing, but it bears no relation to a zebra crossing. As I say, it's more like what you might see on someone's curtains, or that someone might be wearing as swimming shorts, on the beach. Why has anybody spent this money? Taxpayers' cash. We didn't need this. Harry, what's going on?
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, we've similarly, the Taxpayers Alliance, looked at these rainbow crossings that, are celebrating, the LGBT plus community. But what we found is, I think off the top of my head, the figure is about £200,000 of taxpayers' cash has been spent on this by local authorities. Now, As I say, when the tax burden is at a 70-year high, when people's council tax bills are endlessly going up year on year, is this really a priority? And these crossings are not cheap. I think in one particular example, the cost was around about £20,000 or something like that. And that's why, when Miss Braverman said in her piece, we need to worry less about what people say on Twitter, virtue signaling and all that sort of stuff, and ensuring that people are getting the world-class services that they are paying through the nose for. And sadly, to a certain extent, this is just the tip of the iceberg. As I say, this is just in her department.
Can I just interrupt, Harry? Did you say that one crossing might have cost 20,000 quid?
I can't say for definite in the example you stated, but I think just last week we did an example of a crossing somewhere that was, it was in the region of about £20,000. As I say, I think it's around about £200,000 across the country has been spent on these crossings. And, when, councils claim their budgets are cut to the bone, I think it's a bit rich that they're spending money on those sorts of things.
I think it's utterly appalling. I mean, I really do. Households up and down the country are looking at their household budgets. I've been talking today about what people do actually if they genuinely just cannot pay their bills. So we're all trying to save 5, 10 quid and 100. And I'm saying to the government, and the government, in my view, these leadership candidates, they should be saying to all of their government departments, you should be saving 5 quid and 100.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I say, to a certain extent, this what Ms. Braverman is saying is just the latest in a long line. I mean, back in 2020, we discovered that £400,000 had been spent on so-called unconscious bias training. Similarly, I think it was September last year, Black Lives Matter training was being offered to NHS England staff as part of diversity courses, that sort of thing. This is from a group, that wanted to defund the police.
Harry, just whilst you're on, we have a great tweet here from JP in Cornwall. You'll like this, Harry. This diversity rubbish used to be positive discrimination and is just that, discrimination. Let's get back to being a meritocracy. If you're good enough, you're in, irrespective of colour, creed, gender, and I would add, and faith. It's all irrelevant. I just want you to do your job properly, fast.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I keep banging on about it, but, we are at a 70-year high tax burden. We are paying through the nose for public services. There's always talk about, we need more money for public services and these things. Well, maybe if we stop wasting money in the first place on, sort of woke Whitehall, to coin the term, then the government wouldn't need to keep digging into the pockets of taxpayers. I think we have a government spending problem rather than a shortage of taxpayers' cash.
We do indeed. Well, Harry, you and your team, they do great work. Keep it up, because never, ever has it been more vital and more essential. That's Harry Phone from the Taxpayers Alliance on that. Before we go to the bottom of that, I had a really useful, actually, tweet here from Jasper, just clarifying regarding utilities. They don't cut people off. They now fit prepayment meters under warrant if necessary, so that the customer cuts themselves off if they can't pay. So that's just an additional observation from there. Coming up after the news, we are going to be talking to the man himself, uncensored Jeremy Kyle, in his, I think he may not be yet in his big studio. I can say he's loving it, though, absolutely loving being back at home in a TV studio. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV.
Just when you think you've read it all, gender activists want scientists to stop categorising ancient human remains as either male or female. Clearly, anatomically, you can tell if it's a male skeleton or a female skeleton. These woke archaeologists are labelling them as non-binary or gender-neutral. What message does it send to kids who are studying history? It's absolute nonsense, isn't it? Join me, David Bull, for incisive political comment, analysis and, of course, some fun here on Talk TV.
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Zora Suleiman. The Bank of England has predicted that the UK is heading towards a long recession starting this winter. They say there'll be 5 consecutive quarters of economic downturn, which would make it the longest since the 2008 financial crisis. Inflation is now predicted to peak at 13% early next year. In response, the bank has raised interest rates by 0.5% to 1.75%. The governor of the Bank of England says it would hit the poorest the hardest.
This is a very uncomfortable situation to be in. We're very aware of the impact it has, therefore, on those who are least well off. If we don't bring inflation back to target, bearing in mind the huge scale of the energy shock we're seeing. If we don't bring it back to target, and if we get these so-called second-round effects entering in, it's going to get worse. And it will get worse precisely, I'm afraid, for those who are least well off in society.
It says Ofgem has confirmed the energy price cap will be updated 4 times a year instead of every 6 months. The energy regulator has warned that customers face a very challenging winter ahead and said the price cap will have to rise to stop more energy suppliers from going bust and prevent instability in the market. Rishi Sunak has said that Liz Truss's tax policies will only stoke inflation. It's ahead of another debate tonight. Truss has disagreed and said to Sunak that we cannot tax our way to growth and said her tax cuts wouldn't be inflationary. And Archie Battersby's life support was not withdrawn early this morning after his parents submitted a request to have him moved to a hospice. Archie's doctors say it's too risky to move him, but his family insists that they should be allowed to choose where the 12-year-old spends his last moments. Well, that's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back, my friends. We are well into the third hour of Tice Talk. I'm sort of imposting for Ian Collins, who is away this afternoon. We've had a full-on live show, full of common sense, and there's more of it that's just been tweeted in from Mike, who says, I love this, absolutely brilliant. The Russian Nord Stream gas pipeline is 1,400 kilometres long, 3 times the distance from Glasgow to London. This is great, 3 times the distance. How many times could we have installed a huge water pipe to pump water from the huge Scottish lochs since the 1976 heatwave? Again, no forward thinking, no common sense. Well, that, I think, says it all, really. We need to have proper long-term thinking. Well, there's lots of common sense in, of course, Talk TV, and Jeremy Kyle is loving, absolutely loving, being back at his home in the TV studio. And I was with him briefly last night. He's with me now. Good afternoon, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm good, my friend. The Tice man coming. Look at me. This is the green room, and I did this yesterday. I'm not going to do it again. I've got my phone propped up on a bowl of fruit, 2 plums and a banana. Honestly, it's ridiculous. Yeah, you were on last night. You were very good. I thought you were very quick, but you were very good.
Well, yeah, right? You didn't want me for too long, but I can see that you're in your element again, Jeremy. You're sort of, it's like being back at home, isn't it? Running around a massive studio.
Listen, everybody knows what talk radio means to me, talk TV means to me, and yeah, it's fun to be back. I'm merely the fluffer for Piers Morgan. He's as I said the other day, it's an extraordinary human being. I mean, you wander through you saw it last night, reams of corridors. It's like a haunted house. And all you see are pictures of Piers grinning down at you, whether he's met the Dalai Lama or has married Paris Hilton. It's extraordinary. You go to the toilet and there's him with Trump. He's got pens and toilet rolls and tea towels, and I mean, honestly, it's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary. But
I mean, it's like living. It's also, that's great. Do you know my daughter's decided in the middle, go away, I'm trying to speak, for goodness sake. Sorry, I do apologise, Richard. It's a ridiculous way to do it. Let's go back there. Have you gone? You're there.
No, I'm here. I'm a bit concerned that you've gone. Just at the time when he's back.
In the midst of it all, we've been trying to, do the show and having such a great time. And of course, it's the same thing that we talk about every day, the things that matter to the people who watch and listen to Talk TV every single day. And I
have to say, Jeremy, I started the show by talking about, things taking too long and actually, what people are going to do if they genuinely cannot pay the bills, and some really, shocking tweets coming in talking about that. And, I mean, the Bank of England, the governor's statement, in all my sort of adult life, I've never heard a more gloomy forecast for the UK than what he said this afternoon.
And when Johnson started and we all got very excited about this policy of levelling up, the truth is the Governor of the Bank of England said just then, this is going to affect the worst off people. And when you talk about, it's August now, we've got no water, and we're going to talk about the hosepipe ban tonight. Flippantly, yes, but also there's a dead serious thing. Farmers will tell you that without enough water, their crops will not be able to grow, they'll not be able to harvest enough, and that means that those foodstuff prices will go through. I get a big fed up, I'm sure you do as well. every day I hear cost of living. We try and make it, I think, and did it on Drive as well, just some practical advice, some common sense. How can people... Because you're right. What is the reality, Richard? At some points, there are going to be people who literally have no options. Either, I don't know, go to prison, default, get a bad credit reference. They're not going to be able to pay their bills. This is a fact.
And that's what I've been talking about and actually talking about, you know, it's much better to talk to companies, talk to lenders up front a month or two early and say, look, I'm really struggling. Can we help?
They're on the phones. Somebody was telling me a great story, well, it's an awful story this morning about a guy whose bill was £294 and he hasn't got the money, and he literally in the end said, I've hung on for 6 hours, I'm sending you an email, I've got 200 quid tops, otherwise my kids, I'm a single dad of 3, they won't eat this week. And you know, when people say those things, they go, really? Absolutely. And so what we need to try and do, I think, in everything, and I think that's what Talk TV is so good at, is not just spouting the news to you and throwing figures, but saying, how can we, you know, react and allow you to get positive and constructive advice from us in terms of what the news is. So hosepipe ban tonight and the impact that has on you know, foodstuffs, and because I think it's a consi. I think the weather forecasts know another sort of drought's coming, which is why, because it's only in the south and the southeast. I think all those twitchy neighbours, it's going to be a nightmare. Honestly, you won't be able to shower 3 times a day. That'll be out the window, won't it?
Yeah, chance to be a fine thing. But don't worry, Jeremy, we've got a desalination plant that we built and the late Duke of Edinburgh opened 12 years ago. But no one actually worked out if it could be turned on. I mean, you couldn't make it up. It could only happen in Britain.
Oh, my God. We've got Tobias Elwood, of course, chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. We're going to talk all things, you know, that world order. You know, the other day, Pelosi's visit to Taiwan and China, you know, actively now in the seas around the island doing their bit. And what does that mean? Are China looking at Russia and Ukraine and thinking maybe we can do the same? We're going to talk to Tobias about that. Obviously, the leadership election that just needs to finish because it's utterly pointless. Richie Sunak's got no hope, has he? Absolutely no hope.
No chance at all. And we've got another 4 weeks of this. I mean, I cannot believe that it's taking so long. I said it right at the start, and we've got a vacuum of leadership when we've got the greatest crisis. We've got a crisis of money, we've got a crisis of energy, we've got a crisis of water.
Jacob Rees-Mogg said last night, you know, he's getting on, he's trying to get on, but government is paralysed. That has to be a fact. It is paralysed. So we'll talk to Tobias about that. We set up I want to talk more about the cost of living. I want to talk about the reality, but as I say, useful tips, helps and hints about how people can get on with changing their lives. I want to touch upon that amazing article in the Mail this morning, Suella Braverman. Did you talk about how she's de-woking her department? How wonderful was that to hear?
Oh, absolutely brilliant. Her interview with Julia was amazing. Some common sense. I've just been talking about that, the need to... You know, actually, none of the government ministers and the leadership candidates are talking about saving the waste of government cash, Jeremy.
Absolutely, and you know, we're skint, but how many billions were spent during the pandemic and, you know, wasted as well? So I do think, you know, that the one thing about it as well in terms of how we all do it on Talk TV, it's not about scaremongering, it's not about warmongering or scaremongering, but we need to understand these are dire, dire times. This country is about to go into recession. People have less in their pockets. Things are far more expensive on the shelves. And you know what? You wake up every day, Richard, and you think, what's next? And we need to do our bit to help people understand that and get through it. So listen, will you be watching tonight or will you be in some trendy wine bar?
Of course, I shall be watching or listening wherever I am, Jeremy. But actually, there was a great tip from someone who suggested maybe Parliament should be recalled. So maybe we should be asking ministers...
I don't understand why... They're all... What are they doing? I mean, this is when we need our politicians and they're all on holiday.
We've got a crisis. They're on holiday, but there's no crisis at Talk TV because Jeremy is on at 8. The great Jeremy Carr standing in for Piers Morgan. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be taking your calls, your thoughts, your tweets, your messages. Loads coming in. Thanks to Jeremy for that. Les says on his message, a couple of disastrous events coming home to roost. No forward planning on government gas storage or oil or gas production, all caused by green zero carbon policies without the due diligence. And the fact is that green energy R&D takes decades. That is the reality. They've rushed this thing and they've exposed this country to huge inflation, a lack of energy, and it's utterly catastrophic. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk. We're into the last quarter of an hour of the show before Dr. David Bull comes up at 4 to take you through until 7. And then it's the news desk and then Jeremy Carr. We've got some great messages coming in. One here from Tom in Suffolk, who says, Richard, nobody at Talk Radio is reading this. There's a dirty, great big pipe about to be buried from Scunthorpe in the northeast to Essex via the east, supplying northern water. Tom goes on to say, being a gardener, it's a challenging year with coming out a bit dryish after coming out of a dryish winter. We're always going to have issues, Tom says. Everywhere's dry, but actually we're having a summer and the tan is top. Well, Tom seems to be pretty happy in Suffolk. Meanwhile, another really good message just come in about the Bank of England, which came in from Johnny, who says, the Bank of England says we've got 5 months of recession starting next year. But last year they said inflation would reach 5% this year. Well, that hasn't gone down very well, given that it's already 9% and rising. Johnny says, drastic action needed, but I don't think trust tax cuts will be enough. Rishi helped us get in this mess, so hopefully he has the solution. I'm afraid to tell you, Johnny, he does not have the solution. He wants to keep taxes high. He might generously give you a tax cut in about 7 years' time, whereas Liz is talking about giving a tax cut in 7 weeks. In my view, even 7 weeks is too long. They should be in government now, because actually if you cut taxes of consumer goods, then you put money back into people's pockets now, and that will help people get through this crisis. It'll create more growth, and with growth, then you get tax revenues and higher wages. So that, I think, is the solution. I think that Sunak, I'm afraid, has got it all wrong, but then he's not going to win. But we'll go to Enfield now for a call from Ray, who may have his own solution.
Hello there, Richard.
Hi, Ray. How are you doing? What's on your mind? Have you got some solutions to these challenges?
Not really. I'm actually ringing up about Sadiq Khan.
Oh, goodness me.
I was a London cab driver for 30 years, and we've got a name for him. It's not a rude name, so don't worry. It's called Sadiq Carnage, because that's exactly what he done to London. He absolutely slaughtered London. And what I would say is this: London and going out to the M25 is not a dome. It's not a dome. It's actually free air. Now, I'll challenge you to go down, get some of this bad air, as he puts it, put it in a balloon, and you tell me where it's going to end up. Because I work nights, and you go in the city, and it was all clear. Yeah, you know, there are places there that are, you know, that you do stagnate, but you will find it's where Sadiq Carnage has narrowed the roads down, put cycle lanes in.
It's unbelievable. I mean, you take somewhere like Park Lane, in a huge road, and it's 20 miles an hour, and it's always a permanent queue. But here's the thing, Ray, it's not just London. Actually, across cities up and down the country where they talk about these congestion zones, it hits the poorest the hardest, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. I mean, the thing is this, Richard. A few months ago, and it probably affected you, everyone ended up with sand on the top of their cars.
Yes.
That was blown in from the Sahara. And he's saying, oh, no, we've got to protect London, we've got to do this. Well, and the other thing is that I'd like to get across is this. I picked a surgeon up, right? And I apologise. I said to him, look, mate, I'm sorry, but the traffic is... He went, no, I totally understand. And he started talking to me about how bad it was. And he turned around and he said, you know what, I'm a surgeon. And I said, all right. And he said, yeah. He said, if I was to cut off a body like he's cut off London, he said the patient would die.
Yeah.
I thought, do you know what? He's right.
It's so true, and I've had a number of messages, one here from Derek, because I was talking earlier with Keith Prince about this, but actually Greater Manchester was about to impose this. They even put the cameras up for a clean air congestion scene, but actually there was such an uproar amongst residents, they've paused the whole scheme, and Burnham's trying to sort of splutter his way out of it.
The thing is that my son and son-in-law own their own business. And, you know, they're roofers and they have 2 vans. And they said, you know, we're going out of business. We can't afford new vans. And a friend of mine that owns 400 vans has turned around and said, you try and buy one. You cannot get them for love nor money.
And this is the thing, it affects the tradesmen, you know, people out there to do a proper day's work for a proper day's earnings, and they're being hit the hardest. And I mean, it's just insanity personified.
Well, the thing is as well, Richard, is that, you know, they get phone calls all the time. They don't advertise. It's all recommendations. And my son or son-in-law will say, yeah, we'll come down and give you a free estimate, but we've got to charge you because we're bringing our vehicles into, you know, and they go, what's that for? Well, you know, we have to charge you because you might not give us the job or whatever.
Yeah,
oh, no, don't bother.
they've paid the fee. Ray, great call. Thank you so much for that, and I hope your sons keep up that great work. Roofers doing essential work. I would be a bit worried that I would fall off. But anyway, thank you very much for calling, Ray in Enfield. We're going to head up to York, where Emma's on the line. Hi, Emma.
Hi, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm all right, as long as I'm not up a roof trying to repair a roof, otherwise I'd fall off. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm in a car with some kids, so hopefully they'll be quiet.
Hi, kids.
Oh, God. Hi.
Oh, what a great sound. Love it. Absolutely love it. Where are they all off to? Where are you off to?
We've just been picked up from a pony camp, so they're very happy having had their horse time today.
Well, let's hope they didn't fall off the pony either. What's on your mind, Emma?
Well, I was going to talk about the climate and net zero, but just really quickly with the white privilege situation. You know, like I do, that the group most unlikely to go to university, the poor white boys, and all the white privilege agenda comes from the whole slavery and Black Lives Matter situation. But most people don't know about the really rich African kings, and with slavery, there were more white slaves taken from the UK to Africa than slaves taken from Africa to the Americas. And not only that, but the white slaves were deemed weak, so they were actually cheaper. So not only were white people slaves, they were the cheaper option.
Yeah, that's a new one on me, but I agree with you. This whole white privilege thing is, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, it's discriminatory, divisive nonsense. You know, we want to be a meritocracy. We want brilliant people to do great things, and it's just, why keep raising this stuff? Why keep making people feel questioning themselves and try and divide people when actually we're united? Have I lost Emma? I think I may have lost Emma. The kids in the car may have pressed the button, but there we are. We've lost Emma in York. But thanks very much for that. We've got loads of tweets and messages coming in here. We've got one here from George who says, "Hi Richard, the elephant in the room is the Treasury. The mindset's wrong, it needs a complete overhaul." George, you are so right. It does need a complete overhaul, and I'm concerned that, well, whoever's going to be the new Chancellor, they've got to bring in some good advisors, some really high-quality economists outside the groupthink. Otherwise, we're just going to end up with same old, same old. That is for sure. And then we've got more messages here. Mike says, do you think the government delaying over fuel prices is to replenish the Chancellor's coffers? That's the sort of short-term thinking, unhelpful thinking, that it may well be the case, Mike, but it's just not the right thing to do, because you just heard there from Ray in Enfield, his sons, the roofers, you know, they're not able to go and quote for work because of the congestion charge. For some of these things, you know, people having to charge extra sort of expenses for fuel to go to places. All of this is a burden and a hindrance on what we need, which is activity, which is trade, because that's what's going to get this country going again. We've got to go for it. We've got to put the foot on the accelerator rather than more taxation and more burdens. Goodness me, who'd want to wait 7 years for a tax cut? But talking of accelerating, let me tell you, folks, I've been here for the last 3 hours standing in for Ian Collins, but the great Dr. David Bull has just accelerated into the studio. You didn't know where the segue was going, did you?
I had no idea what you were going to say next.
Honestly, I haven't got a tie on, but you know, you've got a marvellous. Well, you know, I came here in a bit of a rush, as it turns out. But goodness me, we have had a full-on show. And David, let me tell you, I asked the question to people, what will you do if you cannot pay the bills? And, you know, I hate asking it because it sounds such a sort of drastic negative thing to ask, but it's sort of where we're at, and there's some really shocking tales, but also some great advice has been coming in from people. That statement from the Bank of England governor was shocking.
Yeah, completely. And I do wonder, what on earth has the Bank of England been doing? You know, they have one job, don't they? Their whole point is actually to keep inflation under control. We've seen it at 9.4%. We know it's going to go up as high as 13, probably. And, of course, people are struggling. And I think you summarised that beautifully, which is Rishi Sunak, I just don't feel, understands the mood of the country. You cannot wait for these tax cuts. People are hurting. You can see that already in the way people are choosing their groceries, in the choices they're making, whether they can... And we're in summer.
Yes.
Wait until we get into the winter and try to heat your house.
We had a finance lady on from AJ Bell, the stockbrokers, talking about what you can do if you get into trouble, talking to people, talking to lenders, utility firms early.
It's a great idea, actually.
Rather than present them with a surprise, and I think that is a really good idea.
I mean, we talked about this on the talk last night, about whether you know, is there a big enough movement to say, I mean, essentially what happens if everyone says, I can't afford it?
Yeah.
And then there will be real problems. And, of course, we've sort of seen this once before, you know, back in the 1970s, and I'm deeply worried about where we go from here. And I do think that the MPs being away for the next, 5-6 weeks is ridiculous.
Great suggestion from one of the listeners saying, you know, actually... They should be recalling Parliament to come and, you know, actually run the country, and the government needs to be back in Westminster, not in
100%.
You know, all over the country. What's on your show?
Oh, well, also all of this. I've got Trevor Kavanagh coming in, obviously with the political roundup. Rishi Sunak's U-turn, another one. I mean, it's not looking good, is it? You know, and I'm sort of asking whether you think it's time for Rishi Sunak to concede defeat and actually end this contest, which is going on far too long.
I wonder if that pressure will grow.
Well, I think it is growing, and then of course we're talking about this petition for Boris Johnson. I mean, I've been watching this, as you know. We're now at 15,000, but also we've now seen that actually the constituency party chairs, I don't know if you've seen this, have started writing to the National Convention of the Conservative Party saying they don't believe that this is lawful, what they're doing to get rid of Boris Johnson. This is running.
This could run.